Good morning, everyone. 9 o'clock, it's about 9:02. I'll call the meeting to order. And first workshop, or the first item on our workshop is CCUA. And let Mr. Lasher tell us where we are on the CCUA.
Okay, well, this morning you've noticed that we've got several topics before the budget. And the reason we're going to cover those before the budget is they will, depending on what your thoughts are, they will each affect the budget. And so we'll kind of talk through that, and then how that impacts the budget, Ted will cover when we get to that point. Okay, so the PowerPoint is coming up. So the first thing I want to talk about is CCUA. As three of our council members, or two of our council members and the mayor are on the CCUA board, and they are looking at an expansion and update of the sewer treatment plant. What we're hearing is the estimated cost is around $12 million for Bel Aire. That will, looking at our debt service over 20 years, we're probably looking at around a $400,000 a year annual payment for that. So what I wanted to cover is a little bit, some are new, some of the citizens at home may be watching and want to know a little bit about what CCUA is. So I've got a brief slide here on the history. So CCUA was created in 2001. It's a partnership between the city of Bel Aire and the city of Park City. Each entity owns 50% of it. There are 6 board members, 3 from each city. So no one city can run the CCUA or have any power over the other. So it was formed under a state statute that allows for quasi-municipal entity. So it allowed for the 2 cities to come together to create this. So as part of that in the bylaws, the CCUA can add members. So if they wanted another city that wanted to come in, they would have to set the terms and would have to approve adding a member by a 2/3 majority vote. Or if a entity wanted to leave the CCUA, the board would have to approve that by a 2/3 majority vote. In addition, there are bond covenants currently that the CCUA has, and those bonds covenants require each city to cover half the cost of those bonds. And so the piece to leave CCUA would be to pay off that portion of the bonds that entity owns. So this is the way that you can get other groups in or out. When it was formed, Park City had an existing sewer treatment plant that was built in 1994. They gave that as part of their initial startup, and the city provided cash for the Bel Aire's portion of that. The water treatment plant went online in 2003. Prior to that, each city had their own wells. So CCUA constructed a water treatment plant. All the wells from each city go to feed the water treatment plant. CCUA purchased additional water rights from Westar in 2003. And so CCUA has plenty of water rights between the 2 cities and the Westar purchase for probably 20, 30 years. So there's no concern about water rights. A sewer headworks update and station improvements were completed in 2011. And what CCUA is looking at now is some upgrades to meet KDHE requirements and plant expansion, because it is getting close to the maximum amount it can treat. And then, as I said, in 2019, both cities gave their water rights to CCUA. So CCUA owns all the water rights. So that's the history. As I said, the makeup, there's 3 boards, or there's 3 members from each city. Each city is responsible for 50% of the water treatment debt. So there's debt and there's operation and maintenance. So for the water side, the plant is the debt, and then water treatment is the operation and maintenance. Each city pays 50% of both. So Bel Air is responsible for 50% of the debt and 50% of the operations and maintenance. As far as the sewer side, Bel Air is responsible for 47% of the debt, and Park City's responsible for 53% of the debt, and that's the same for operation and maintenance. Now, why that's not 50-50, I don't know, but when it was created, that's the way the bonds were set up. So Park City does have less debt, so it's hard to compare rates because they have less debt. When they first started, they included their sewer treatment plant, so that was not debt that they had to incur. They also, a few years back, they had a settlement on some contamination, received a few $1 million and put that towards the headworks debt. And so you can't look at debt overall and split that 50-50 because Park City did include some infrastructure, some cash when debt was issued. The water tower that's over here by Isley, that was actually financed through a Park City bond, or not Park City, CCUA bond. And so, but Bel Air is responsible for that cost. So again, that's why it's difficult to look at. This is what the debt is. It's 50-50 divided because there's some mixes in there. So the concerns that I think staff is looking at and our council is concerned about is, one, water production issues. So what we know is that CCUA plant capacity can treat 450 million gallons per year. And that will not supply 100% of the needs from both cities. So that's why each city has separate agreements to purchase water from Wichita. The water rights are there, but the production is not available to treat all the water both cities need. So for example, Bel Air, we need about 300 million gallons per year. Park City is probably going to need that much as well. So the needs are around 600 million. It's only producing 450. So that's why we have to look at getting water somewhere else or expanding the water treatment plant. Those are the two options. Bel Air has a take or pay, and it expires in 8 years. Park City has a take or pay with Wichita, and it is expiring next year. So there's been discussion with the CCUA board and specifically our council on looking at an agreement between CCUA and Wichita. So each city doesn't have a take or pay. CCUA manages all the water needs and then sells it to each city, and they acquire they either treat it or acquire it. In 2012, there was a water allocation agreement between Park City and Bel Air because if you look at, Ted did a presentation to CCUA, but if you look at, typically we've been running around 37% of the production of water has been going to Bel Air. Park City's been taking the rest. So you can see that creates an inequity because we're paying 50-50 on everything, but we're only getting 30% of the water. And the rest we have to buy from Wichita. And again, we can do that because we have a take or pay. So in 2012, there was a separate agreement between the two cities to try to make that a little bit more fair. And so in that agreement, Bel Air can take 165 million gallons per year, which is 38%. However, we're still responsible for 50% of everything. The other piece of it that helped was that there was a true-up included where the cities were billed per 1,000 gallons based on operation maintenance. So again, what the idea was is that we had to take at least 150. They only would allow us to take 165. We ran into that last year because we needed a lot of water. And so basically you can see we have a take or pay with CCUA. We have to take at least 150 million gallons. We're paying for 50%, and then we've got a take or pay with Wichita. So that true up was supposed to say, okay, we took 37%. Park City took the remaining, so let's move that let's have them repay Bel Air some of that extra cost for the added amount they took. The problem is that helps a little bit, but we're back to Bel Aire's paying 50% of the debt service. And so it's really still not fair. The other question we have is, are there meters installed for each city? And are they calibrated accurately? Because CCUA bills each city, and we're not sure if everybody has the meters and if they're billed or how that's working. So that's another question we have that we want to get from CCUA. So basically, when we talk about inequities, this is just operation and maintenance. So over the past 5 years, you can see that on average, Bel Aire's taking 37%, Park City's taking 63%. And then you can see what the costs are. And if we had something in place where it was actually divided on the amount that was taken, we've paid an extra $332,000 over the last 5 years. That's the inequity we're talking about and the concern we have.
So, Mr. Lasher, one of the things I noticed in reading through the contracts is that there was a contract signed that said that meters would be installed for sewage and water. The question is, did it actually happen, right?
That's exactly right. And on the sewer side, it's my understanding that that didn't happen.
Yeah. And then what is the calibration frequency of those meters? Right?
Because meters have to be calibrated every so often. And so
where I live,
we don't know if they've been and if they've been calibrated. So again, that's the concern that we as staff have, and I know the council is sharing, is that over the last 5 years, we paid $332,000 more than we should have. So what I think that council is looking for, what we as staff would like to see, is that some changes take place before we issue any bonds for any kind of improvements. So what we want is for Bel Aire and Park City to have, or no longer have the independent water agreements. So each city actually truly becomes a customer of CCUA. CCUA produces whatever they can. They buy the rest they need from Wichita, and then we simply deal with CCUA. And so we're their customer. And then that takes away the need for each of us to have separate take or pays. CCUA handles that. They know what they can produce. They know what they need to buy, and then they sell it to us. Meter all water used by Bel Aire, Park City, and the plant. So in plant operations of water and sewer, they actually use water. And we don't know how much they're using. And so that's where, as the mayor said, we want to make sure that that Bel Aire, Park City, and the plant all have meters and that they're calibrated, and we could actually detail how much each entity is using. That CCUA will bill each city based on the per 1,000 gallon usage. So that makes it a little easier when CCUA is purchasing water. So at that point, we buy 300 million, Park City buys 400 million, and it's billed on a per 1,000 gallon basis for each. So that's the fairness of that. Each city pays 50% of the debt service and has access to 50%. And then if either city loses 50% or uses less than 50%, plant capacity, a true up takes place. So you saw that in the last 5 years, we were using about 37% of the plant capacity. If CCUA buys all of the water from Wichita, then that should become more fair because it produces 465. And so that plant produces 465. Each of us should take half of that. And then, but above that, so let's say 465, Bel Aire uses 300, Park City uses 400 million. So we're each taking 50% of that. So it becomes fair then on that. And then that extra amount that has to be purchased from Wichita, Park City's paying the majority of that cost because they're the one using the majority of it. So again, that's the reason why CCUA buys it from Wichita, because at that point, we're each then taking 50%. So the other piece is the sewer production issues, and that's what the CCUA board is looking at now, as I stated earlier, why. So what we've been able to ascertain is that the sewer plant can treat 550 million gallons per year. That's what we don't have a sure number, but that's what it looks like to us. So our question is, when will capacity be met? We know it's not now. They're not at capacity now. They probably will be in the next year or 2 or 3. So that's why the CCUA board's looking at that. The question that we don't know is, we know that there's a $12 million cost, but how much of that is plant expansion and how much is just needed for KDHE requirements? So every few years, KDHE comes out with new regulations, which require plant upgrades to make sure we're meeting their new regulations. So is that $1 million? And then the plant expansion is 10 million? We don't know. That's something that we want to understand. Right now, we have an agreement that we can overflow to Wichita, the city of Bel Aire does, and we're paying $3.25 per thousand to send it to Wichita. And we've had to use that when one of our lift station went down. We needed to send some sewer to Wichita, and so we know that that's what the cost is. That's what we were billed. So again, we're back to the equity in the operations. This is very similar to the water side. So in 2015, we did an agreement with Park City and Bel Aire separately, and basically that gives Bel Aire 198 million gallons of treatment capacity, and we're paying 40% of the debt service, and then we also have to pay 47% of the operation and maintenance. So the concern that we have, as you can see, if you subtract 198 minus the 550, that's not 47%. So we calculate our needs of about 206 million gallons per year is what Bel Aire needs. So again, you subtract 206 minus 550. If we're going to look at our needs, if we're entitled to 47%, we've got a few years before Bel Aire hits our 50% or 47% of that 550. So that's a concern we have, is that CCUA is saying we need to expand the plant. We're not even using our 47% of the plant. Now I realize CCUA has to look at it as a whole, but from our staff, we look at it as, wait a minute, we're paying for 47%, but we don't have access to that, and you're telling us we need to expand the plant. So Park City, again, based on what we can see, we have not seen Park City's numbers. We're just looking at what CCUA produces. They need about 318 million gallons. So you add those two together, you can see then you're getting close to that 550 amount, and you can see why then CCUA is looking at needing to expand in the next few years. Again, our concern is that, but if we're paying 47%, we're not using 47% of the plant. And so our citizens paying for a plant expansion that we don't need is a concern. And again, Ted and I, in putting this together, we're looking at Bel Aire. Now we understand that CCUA board is going to look at CCUA, but that's our concern. The other issue that we have is sewer meters. And again, as the mayor said, it said in that agreement, everybody was supposed to put in sewer meters. And to my knowledge, Bel Aire is the only one that has sewer meters. So again, the CCUA utilizes the sewer treatment plant. So in the water production, they have water that has to go through treatment to be discharged. So they use a portion of the sewer. We don't know how much. From what we understand is that Bel Aire is the only one that has meters. So at that point, what Park City's using and what CCUA using is just being estimated based off our meters. And again, we don't know if they're accurate or not because they were put in several years ago.
Ty,
Yes.
who owns the meters for the Bel Air sewer line, are those City of Bel Air meters or CCUA meters?
So, and that's a good question. And that's when I get to the last side, that's one of our concerns, is that we feel that CCUA needs to do an inventory to determine who owns those meters, who owns the lines, because that's been an issue in the past. If I remember right, Bel Air paid to put those meters in. So are they ours? I don't know why they should be if it's benefits CCUA, but that needs to be determined, because that's always been a cost of who pays for lines, who pays for meters, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, and that's something that's been discussed at CCUA due to recent issues with lines and a lack of clarity of ownership there.
Right. Yep.
The way that contract reads, those meters are supposed to be put in at CCUA's expense, but did that really happen? That's the question, right?
It's a good question. Yeah. Yeah. So when we look at inequities, again, we've paid, Bel Air has paid basically over the last 5 years, 39% of the sewer usage, and Park City's used 61%. We've paid roughly 48%. So our citizens paid $410,000 more than they should have, based on our numbers. So that's the concern staff has. So on sewer production changes, here's what we think needs to happen. CCUA needs to determine the max capacity of the sewer treatment plant. Again, our guesstimation's 550. That may be right. It may be more or less.
And that 550 is really what we did last year, assuming that that's the max they can do. So that's the biggest concern. All our numbers shift once we find out that max capacity number. However, we're being very conservative and saying maybe last year was almost near the max. You know, we rounded up and said that's near the max. So that's a very important question for us as finance, of staff. We got to really know what's the max.
And if you were to find that capacity was 600 or 650, how would that affect the projections?
It gives us more years to get closer to 2033 when the current existing debt falls off the books. That's the name of the game. We understand owning your own equipment is far superior than being slave to Wichita for too long. However, we can't continue this cycle, I guess, of paying
debt. Yeah. So have we contacted Wilson Company, who's done the engineering work on the expansion, to see what their numbers were on these capacities?
No, I asked Jacob, the CCUA manager, to get those numbers, and I've not seen anything from him.
Thank you.
And then, of course, meter by each city. I don't think it's happening. Maybe it is, but from what I understand, it's not. And the CCUA. There's no take or pay agreement between CCUA. So that 215 agreement, where it kind of tied our hands to 198, but yet we're paying for 47%, all that stuff goes away. At that point, it's based on per 1,000 gallons. So if we use 37%, we get charged 30%. Same with Park City. If they use 63%, they get charged that. And then each city pay 50% of the debt service and has access to 50% of the capacity. So that's a concern. As I said earlier, we're paying 47% of the debt, but we don't have access to it. And then on the debt side, if either city uses more than their allotted capacity, a true up on the debt takes place. So in other words, we determine what the debt is, how much each city owes. And then if the Park City uses 57% of the plant capacity, then they reimburse Bel Air for our share of that. And again, this is something that the board will have to discuss. This is what we think is fair from our side of the story. I know that the board will have to consider Park City as well. So sewer plant expansion. This is, again, what we're looking at. And I know that our board members are concerned, and CCUA is as well. So we're only sending about 205 million gallons of sewer per year to CCUA. We're allotted 258. So as staff, we're saying, why do we need to expand the plant? We're not even using ours that we have access to. Current debt service is 700,000 per year. It ends in 2033. That's what Ted was talking about. So all of our current debt. Proposed expansion adds 400,000 per year. I mentioned that earlier. Based on Bel Air numbers, sending sewer to Wichita, we know that there's a $3.25 fee to do that. If we had an agreement with Wichita and that we were going to send a certain amount, would that price be lower or more? We don't know. That's something that I think we want to, look into. But based on Ted's numbers, it would be cheaper to send sewer to Wichita until 2028. Again, based on the numbers that we've put together, before we need to expand the plant. So in other words, it's cheaper to pay Wichita than that additional debt service up until 2028. And at that point, you probably really need to look at an expansion. So how does that affect Bel Air residents? A plant expansion, the debt would add $8 a month to every customer, or that's $100 a year for that plant expansion. If sewer and water operations maintenance were billed on a per 1,000 gallon basis, again, using the numbers that we've put together, our utility customers would save $3 a month or $36 a year. And again, that's that inequity.
And Ty, is that number before new debt for plant expansion or after new debt for plant expansion?
So the $3 is before, I guess, currently.
So basically that's,
If you did a true up today of both the infrastructure cost and the operation cost, that would be the.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we don't want to broadcast, we're going to, next year if it happens, everybody's bill's going up 8. There's a lot of different ways we can, we've been preparing with reserves, and also a lot of different ways we can look in the budget to, cushion any kind of blow. It's just not something we want to get too far. And, that's just the actual representation. You take 400,000 divided by 4,000 customer accounts. That's the number you get.
so that would be worst case scenario if we did nothing, burn up our reserves or anything like that. It would be if CCUA issued that debt and we did nothing, each rates would have to go up $8 per customer.
Hey, Ty, I got a question.
Yes.
The 205 gallons at the top line there. One of the things that CCUA had, I guess they haven't shown that projection in the last year, but they had that forecast for looking 4 or 5 years into the future when the plant meets its actual capacity. Do you know what the Bel Air component of that is, like looking to 2024, where that 205 goes to?
So, and I'm not sure what, I've read a little bit of the study you're talking about, and they really just looked at how many, I don't think they broke it. Let me restart. They did break out some Bel Air and Park City usage, but it goes down to the root cause of, how are they metering that? How are they getting those numbers? This projection is mainly off of the CCUA meter readings and flow. The history, if you do it, not to get too far in the weeds, but we're just unsure of the reliability of those meters. And then maybe the company that did the estimates have better information than what we have CCUA provided with the flows. I don't see how they could have better information because that's literally all we have. That's where I'm confused as well, and why it's so important to have accurate numbers on that usage and meters, because it skews all the numbers. But there's also self-checks we can do. I can run a report wide open on our system that shows the winter average consumption of all the citizens of Bel Air, and it's about 180 million gallons a year. Makes sense. It's probably a little lower than what you think. So that 205 to me sounds like a reasonable estimate, because all the other little checks I have on that seem to line up to that. So if the expert says something else, I'd be interested in saying where he got that number.
And we guesstimated our growth at 5%. So if you just took that 200, well, let's do it easy. 200 million, 5% would be 10 million a year. So it'd be 5 years before we would probably hit the 258, which is our share, which is our half of the current plant capacity without adding any additional capacity. So again, Jeff, just to bring you up to date, what we're looking at is Bel Aire's interest. That's what we have. And I know you and the other board members have to look at the thing, the CCUA as a whole. But I'm just kind of laying out our concerns. And that's a big one, is that we should, if we're paying 40% of the debt service and operations maintenance, we should be able to utilize 258 million gallons. And you can see we're not using that. So from our staff standpoint, we have trouble saying, let's expand the plant when we're not even using our full half of it. So overall changes, this is what we think CCUA needs to consider. Determine the max capacity for sewer and water treatment. And Jeff, that was your question, is what is that number? We need someone to tell us what that number is. And, you know, we feel pretty confident in our numbers, but if someone wants to do a better analysis, great. We're happy to get their numbers. Meter all sewer water used by each city and the plant. So if we're going to get accurate, we need to know how much plant's using, how much each city's using. Negotiate the agreement with Wichita for wholesale water, but with CCUA. So each city does away with our individual agreement. CCUA has all the water rights and sends all the water to each city. So they should be able to do that. Remove the CCUA bond requirements for cities to use gap funding. That's a TED thing. So
Can you explain that a little bit, please?
So City of Wichita, Sedgwick County are on gap basis. Not at every smaller city is not on. It's exactly what we talked about every time our audit comes up. Most cities are at our size are KMAG, which is a different accounting standard. What we run into with gap is a lot of times I can't have access to every component. There's a lot of, it's really meant on the operations side to make sure, let's see, on the operations side, there's a lot of different checks and balances, but I have a staff of 2. So we get pinged with a lot of little things that are considered minor. And what it does is it puts us down to a standard that's more in line with the size of our city and where we're at. I used to think it was the land debt that was doing it, but I had it researched, and it's actually CCUA that was making us use gap. So this is something, if we're going to ask for some things, I recommended asking for this to avoid a lot of, and about $10,000 of extra payments we would have to make to convert a lot of books that we do each year.
Is this gap requirement in the bond covenants?
It is.
Okay, so that's probably Kevin Cowan question, right? If that can be done.
and he would work on that for us. So.
The bond covenants, are those specific to the bonds that are issued every time, or are there covenants that are outside of each individual bond issuing?
I believe last time we talked about it, it would be the good and bad is they refinance a lot of small bonds into one big. So it would be going like this current, if we were to expand it, the language would be in there saying we didn't have to follow gap. And then CCUA, I believe, could contact some of the bond, be able to remove it from the existing bonds as well.
But at a minimum, you could ask for it to be removed from future bond issuing.
Exactly. At a
Not
minimum.
a lot of
and then
effort.
once those, if we refinance or we can end the practice then.
Okay.
So the current bond requirements that we have for other debt do not have gap requirements in there.
According to Kevin Cowan, no.
Okay, thank you.
So then what we would recommend is for CCUA to hire a firm to complete an audit. So, again, we don't know those numbers. Jacob's new. He's been there 2 months. We Bel Air did that a few years ago. We hired PEC to come in and look at our utilities and help us with rates and things like that. So they look at all of that. So we would recommend a company, typically it would be an engineering firm, to come in and determine what the max operations are, when they would need to expand, et cetera, et cetera. CCUA bill each city for operation maintenance based on the per 1,000 gallons. Again, that does away with that 50/50 or 47/53, and yet only take in a certain percent of it. And really that makes it fair for everybody, not just Bel Air. At some point, Bel Air may take more water than Park City does. So that's just fair. CCUA produces max capacity of water treatment and then purchases the additional needs from Wichita. So again, if we've got a plant, it ought to be at max capacity, and that limits the amount that we need to buy from Wichita, because if you look at operation and maintenance from CCUA, it is cheaper. Now, when you add in debt service, it's not, but there's benefits, as Ted said, of having your own plant. So the plant needs to operate at max capacity and then purchase. Same thing with Wichita or the sewer. They need to be at max capacity. And what is that number? We would like to know that. And if it's at max capacity, how much estimated growth is needed? So that's what Jeff was saying. Okay, if it's at max capacity today, then does it need to expand next year, or will it hit max capacity next year? And then we need to expand after that, or at some point. Again, we need to know that. Determine if Wichita would take additional sewer for treatment at the cost. So again, when Ted was looking at the numbers, what we found is that for the next 8 years, based on the numbers that we received from CCUA, it'd be cheaper to send it to Wichita if they would take it for that $325 than to expand the plant. But we need to know if Wichita would do that and how much they'd charge us. Determine if there's interest in selling Wichita untreated water. So as I said, each city was running around 300 to 400, so about 700 million gallons of water is needed from each city. The Westar water rights are about 900 million, and that's just Westar. And then each city had rights too. So there could be a possibility of selling raw water to Wichita and they treat it, because right now they get their water from Cheney and some Equisbeds, I believe. So they may be interested in buying that, and it would be good to know if they are and how much, because that could then reduce some of our cost if we got an income from raw water. And then again, I think we had mentioned earlier, identify all assets owned and maintained by the city. Equipment, pipes, meters. What is it that CCUA owns, and what are they responsible for, and what are we responsible for? Because again, as we talk about capital improvement planning, we need to know if those are our meters, and do we need to calibrate them every so often, or do we need to replace them every so often, or are they CCUA meters? Those are things that we need to know. So that's the history. That's where we as staff have concerns from the Bel Air side, and we wanted to share those with you. Again, the budget impact is that if this goes forward, it's going to add $400,000 a year in debt to our sewer fund, and then our council will have to consider how they offset that with increases in fees or whatever it may be.
And just to add a few things, I did present the CCUA just the kind of the idea of sending some extra to Wichita and prolonging or delaying the expansion. And I kind of ended that with, we really got to show we've explored all other options from the Bel Air side. So I just want to, I deal with a lot of the customers every day, and you guys do too. And, that's important to me to be able to say some of that stuff. I also would like to, put in your mind that the reason we kind of do a holistic version of water, sewer, here's the issues, here's some of that things, is because the citizen really only sees it as a one bill. So if we increase sewer, we're going to have to find a lot of different options it's not a huge deal for us to increase the sewer, but we're going to have to look at trash more closely, water more closely, as well as sewer. So that's what I would say as you're thinking and mulling over these types of decisions. You really have to look at the holistic version of the water bill, and they call it all water bill, but it's not. There's 3 components, sometimes 4 if you include stormwater. So just wanted a couple of those things. The other thing, the makeup of the city, we're primarily residential. Our top 10 water customers are a lot of irrigation meters, HOAs, stuff like that. So we don't have that big business using tons of water where we can calculate. So weather plays a big deal in our usage rates, as well as revenues we receive. So that's why last time when we looked at rates, we said, let's keep our reserves at the 50% level. If it ever dips below the 50% level, then let's start talking about what we can do. Right now in our current budget, when we look at it, they're both above 50%. So we're okay on that in the short term. It's just the long term is what we're looking at. So
I've got several questions. I've been holding off and everybody else keeps cutting in. So if we ever decided we wanted to withdraw from the CCUA, would we get back any of our water rights or wells?
See, that's a concern because up until 2019, each city maintained those. And at that point, the idea was to have CCUA control all the water rights. And so the short answer is no, unless they gave it back to us.
So then we'd be reliant on Wichita for water. Okay. Pipe capacity for both water and sewer. Do we have enough capacity between the CCUA plant and Bel Aire? Or would we continue to rely on Wichita piping if we wanted to use Wichita water or Wichita sewer?
Yeah, so piping for the sewer side, or did you say sewer or water?
Both.
Both, okay. So really on both, we think we're fine. We used to have just 37th and Harding lift station, and that carries about 70%, and that works. All of our new growth is going to the lift station over here at 53rd and Woodlawn, and that was a new, I think, 10 or 12 inch. So we're okay there.
So we can send all of our sewer to CCUA.
Yes.
And we can get all of our water from CCUA.
Right.
Okay, so then the next question then was, if we had an agreement with Wichita, Bel Aire's already got existing connections to Wichita lines. Would we turn those connections over to CCUA and make them responsible for the meters and the backflow preventers and everything else on that connection then?
Yes, they would be responsible for turning on the connections for Park City and Bel Aire when we'd need water. It would be their responsibility. Yep. Okay, so if there's no other ones, if you think about questions, let Ted and I know. Ted's got more graphs and such that if you're interested in seeing graphs and all those things, he can tell you exactly where all these numbers came from, and be happy to share these with you if you need those for any reason.
Yes, I had one last quick question.
Yes, sir.
The issue of the second from the bottom there, the untreated water to Wichita. Is that something that's ever been done? Do you know?
So not for CCUA, the city of Valley Center does. They have some water rights. So they purchased treated water from Wichita, but and they did that so they didn't have to build a sewer treatment or water treatment plant. So they have the wells and the water rights. And so what they did was they sell the raw water to Wichita at a certain price. Wichita treats it and sends it back to them, and then they buy it back. So it's done. And that was the thought of, if we've got plenty of water rights, Wichita is interested, or they're typically interested when there's a drought. When, like all of us, when there's no drought, we're fine. So yes, it can be done.
I don't recall, but do we know if those pipes are in place?
They're not in place.
They would have, so they'd have to be added.
So they'd have to be added. And that would be a question that would be discussed between CCUA and Wichita is who pays for that.
They already run the CCUA, right?
So probably what would happen is a new well would have to be installed because there is a well there that is going to CCUA, but CCUA uses that. So probably install a new well with new piping. And again, that'd be the question of who pays for the
I guess
well.
the question then is the piping capacity from the well big enough that if we routed it through CCUA and then to Wichita, we wouldn't have to run a new line?
That would be something we'd have to look at.
And also just for clarification, untreated water is well water, not gray water from the sewage treatment
Right.
plant.
Yes. Okay, so we'll move on then. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is street repairs. We talked about it Tuesday, got into a little discussion about that. We know we've got a lot of streets that need work. And fortunately, over the last few years, we've been doing quite a bit of street improvements, but there's a lot to be done. 53rd Street was, I think, the one that everybody was talking about at our last meeting. Justin mentioned that interest rates are very low. We know they are. We just issued a bond that was 1.3%. And so this is a great time to get money. So I asked Ann to give me a list of what are the major problems of roads and some costs. And so you can see, obviously, her number one priority is 53rd Street. And I think everybody here that's drove on that knows how bad it is, no question. And to go through, do it right, dig it completely up, put a good base down, 5 inches or 6 inches of asphalt, level the ditches out, we're looking at $2 million. We've tried to get grants from KDOT. We've tried to get it on the WAMPO plan, and we weren't successful either way. They don't see that as a major thoroughfare. It's a city street that the city is responsible for. So we've tried. So there's about $2 million. The other thing that really 53rd Street from Rock to Isley is in good shape. The problem is that when we did that a couple years ago, we put the perfect base down. We put about 2 inches of asphalt on it. It needs another 3 inches of asphalt to bring it up to 5 inches. So to keep that road in good condition, we need to add some asphalt. So that was her number 2. That's $350. You can. The next one was 45th Street, Woodlawn to Oliver engineering design. That's about $700,000. So we talked about this in our budget. The issue is that we've got that street on WAMPO for future funding, and they'll pay 80% of it. Our cost is the engineering. Obviously, if you have the engineering done before a project starts, it goes a lot quicker. We learned that on Woodlawn. We had to hire an engineer, and we're 2 years past where we should have been, but we had to hire an engineer because we didn't do it. So hiring an engineer gets it done quicker. It can also move the project up because at the end of the year, the mayor knows at the end of the year, sometimes they have funds available. And so they go looking for, is there anybody that's ready? Engineering's done, and we can just give them $1 million to get the work done. And if it is, they get it. And so that's another reason to have all the engineering, and you're set to go if some funding comes up earlier. So that's about $700,000.
And the reality is that happens every year. They always end up with, seems like they always end up with some extra money because somebody couldn't do a project or something happened, costs were lower, but it happens.
So, and then you just go down, and there's, this is not all of them, but you're looking at about $5.6 million. So what I asked Ted to put together is, what if we issued $2 million? And again, I didn't know her list. I just said, let's start with $2 million, see what does that do for us. So he did some research. If we did a 10-year note or a bond, we're looking at 1.1% interest. Debt service payments would be about $220,000 a year. And then you can see if we went 20 years, the interest rate goes up a little bit, but your debt service drops. So again, that's $2 million. So if you were interested in issuing, what we do is we go straight to a bond. We wouldn't do a temp note. We just go bond $2 million and get that in probably the next 2 to 3 months. And then we could, Ann would work on engineering, could maybe start reconstruction this fall, spring at the latest. If you wanted to add some other projects in there, we could up that to, let's say we doubled it to $4 million. So if we went 20 years, you're looking at, $250,000. So my preference is, if we're going to do $2 million, or less to do 10 years and just get it over with. Ted likes spreading it out over the years because that makes his payments less. So he likes the 15 or 20. If we're going to go more than 2, then I would say let's push it out because that keeps those payments down.
I would argue that we should not do 20 years because the life of the road is going to need some kind of maintenance before then. So we're still going to be paying for the original road, and then we're going to pay maintenance on top of that.
Yep, and that's a good argument for pushing it out.
For not pushing it out.
So your question is,
Unless you're
then
gonna do
how do we
concrete.
pay for that?
Unless you're going to do concrete.
I don't care what we pay it with.
So
20 years is a long time on a road to not need any kind of maintenance.
the question would be, how do we pay for that? So these are the ways that we think that we could easily fund that. One thing is we want to look at, and we'll talk about that more in the budget, as again, keep in mind, these are all adding to the budget. We're looking at increasing our franchise fees from the utility funds. That would bring in an extra $150,000 to the general fund to help fund that. We've had special assessment savings around $250,000 a year. We're saving from the refinancing $100,000. So there's a number of ways that we could come up with money to cover that without any kind of increases or anything like that.
Ty, can you talk a little bit more about the first one, that increase in franchise fees, or I don't know if you want to wait and hit that in the budget.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about it. I don't want to get into details. I would be happy to talk individually with details, but
Okay.
So the next piece we're going to be talking about is ARPA funds. And so we're proposing doing some water and sewer treatment or water and sewer projects over the next few years, well, actually next year, in the sum about $800,000. And so those are allowable, and so we think that that's a good project. And so we would argue that all of our other utilities pay 6%, and so maybe we should up that, basically that payment from our utility funds to the general fund. So anyway, that's kind of a high view. We can talk a little bit more about it later on, but anyway, that would basically infuse $800,000 to help with payments for something like this.
So I do have a couple of questions. On item 2, that 5-inch asphalt overlay on 53rd to Isley, what is that?
So typically on a major road like that, you want to have at least 5 inches.
Right.
And so when we built it, we tried to do it and I think we did it for 1.2 million a couple years ago.
Are you talking from Woodlawn to Rock?
Woodlawn to Rock.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, because that's listed again down here as item 7. So that's why I was a little confused.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
And right now it's got 2 inches, it's got a great base. It's just that, as the buses and the truck traffic goes over that 2 inches, it's going to start causing some rough areas in the asphalt. So we want to build that up another 3 inches. So that's the reason on that one is, again, to keep that road in good condition.
So, and I know you may not know the details, but what's the thought process on the reconstruction of 53rd? Is that a 3-lane? Is that we got to do some utility work to make this happen?
Right.
What are we thinking about?
So
here?
no 3-lane, it'd just be a 2-lane. But we know that we've heard about drainage concerns and things like that. We'd have to determine the actual width of the right of way, but we think that we can do a 2-lane, hopefully 2 to 3 foot of
Shoulder.
Pardon?
Shoulder.
Yes, shoulder, and then level out the ditches, so that, because right now some of those ditches are they're narrow and they're very deep, and do much better job. So that would really be a whole road reconstruction, and
But not curb and gutter.
no curb and gutter,
Any turn lanes?
no turn lanes. No,
Okay, so none of those divisions would get a separate left turn.
that would probably be something we'd want to look at. There wouldn't be a center turn lane, but maybe some
Yeah, I don't
right
want to do a
turns. We may
mile
wanna
of center
look at
turn
that.
lane for 3 entrances.
Yeah, that would probably be something we'd want to look at, because when they're putting the approach in, it might not be too much more to put an actual turn lane in So I guess the question is, your thought, as we going to look at the budget, and you don't have to answer it right now as we're talking to the budget. Do you think this is a good time to do some borrowing to repair some streets? How much do you think it would be?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think this is a good idea. I think we've got a lot of significant street projects that need to be bumped up in priority. We've freed up some money with land sales, special reductions that I think we can use to pay the financing on those major projects. I like the idea of not financing them for 20 years. And so I'd like to keep that amount to an amount that we can finance over the 10, 15 years at the most.
What'd you say, 200,000 for 10 years for 2 million?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, right now, yeah, with the about 1.14% true interest cost.
I'd be in favor of that. 2 million. I don't know how far that gets us and what else we need to do. That barely covers 53rd Street based on what's here, but
I think I'd like to see that 45th Street engineering is something that needs to get done. After we talked about this just very briefly in the last council meeting, I heard from some citizens about 45th Street and how bad it's been for such a long time. And, a couple things that I've been thinking about since then, the traffic counts on those streets are probably something that we need to consider as we pick which streets we're going to invest in and where those investments can have the biggest bang for the buck. As well as there continues to be a lot of new construction in the 53rd Street area, and the increase in truck traffic, the concrete trucks and all the things that are going to drive on those roads. I'm not sure what Ann's opinion is on how detrimental that construction traffic will be to a new road that we would put in, and if there might be some advantages in actually delaying that until more of the construction has been completed in that area or not.
yeah, I agree with that. We've got a lot of construction going in there. I'd hate to put in a brand new road and then have it torn up by running heavy equipment down it every day.
I know something has to be done because it's dangerous to drive down right now. And so something has to be done. And so figuring out what that right balance is probably an engineering problem.
And
Something to be aware of.
I drove down that the other day and there's really maybe a quarter mile or a little more that's really bad. The rest of it's so-so and probably better than most of 45th. So could we maybe just do some kind of temporary improvement on that one stretch?
So
I know that's kind of throwing away money is what we're not wanting to do, but
yeah. So the problem is that today it's not bad. In a year it will be.
yeah, but in a year we're going to have a bunch of foundations already poured and
Yeah. So the concrete trucks. For example, we've got concrete trucks running through here every day in Central Park. And you can go, as you drove here, you didn't see a lot of problems with it. It's because it's got a good base. It's got a good amount of asphalt on it. The problem is when that road was constructed, the county did it. All they did was they took a grader and leveled it out so it was flat. And then they put cold mix on it about 4 inches and then leveled it out with a grader. So there's no sub base. So at some point, that sub base is going to keep giving out.
I will also mention, though, that Central Park also has a curb, and we don't usually see the trucks driving off the side of the road.
Yeah, and that's why it would
And
be
that's
nice
where
to have
That's where the tear up happens, is they get a little far over and
Yep,
start smashing off the side.
yep.
So we all know, I mean, our focus has always been Woodlawn, Oliver, Rock, 45th and 53rd. Those have been if we had all the money, we would do all those streets completely new, right? So I get the point about possibly delaying 53rd because of new neighborhoods and construction, but the fact is we're going to have that for a long time. There's a lot of neighborhoods being built in the north. How long are you going to delay? I mean, yeah, you get more. If you just delay a year, yeah, you're going to save. But if we do the road right, then that point is moot anyway, unless we didn't spend enough money on it or it wasn't engineered well, right? So in theory, if we throw that $2 million or whatever the cost is to do 53rd Street right between Oliver and Woodlawn, I would think the damage would be minimum. But we're not going to get out. We're in a season of building houses all over the place. So that construction traffic is not going to stop anytime soon. And just building roads, right? I mean, we're building roads in the foreseeable future. We'll be building roads in those neighborhoods. Cement trucks are coming and they're not going to stop after a year. So it's a good point. We should consider it, but I don't know. I'm like, we're going to wait. How long are we going to wait? You know? And, yeah, 53rd is the crater surface of the moon. It's so bad. I mean, I drive 45th all the time. It never strikes me as being that bad. I mean, this is my personal opinion, but I drive 45th all the time, almost as much as I drive Oliver. And I don't know, I never think, oh man, I got to watch where I'm going or the road's bad, or, you know, I guess I'm just desensitized to the thermal cracks that are there. I'm used to the bumps, but I don't know. It's just my casual observation is 45th isn't falling apart the way 53rd is. I mean, 53rd is outright dangerous. And I mean, it's dangerous. So yeah, I at a minimum, we got to do something about 53rd. We've been talking about it every year, and it's just the more the schools continue onward, and yeah, I don't know. At a minimum, I'm willing to do the bond out $2 million or whatever it takes to do 53rd right. The point about 53rd to Isley, I guess that's kind of new to me. I hadn't seen that item before. To me, that's a preventive maintenance thing because it's kind of a similar issue. So, you know, if we wanted to kind of couple those together at, what is that, 2.4 million looks like it might be. I guess my feet get a little cold thinking about anything beyond that, really. I mean, all these things on this list are good things to be done. Oliver and yeah.
Well, what if we, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like there's consensus that this is a good time to get some money and do some projects. And why don't we look at 2 to 3 million, kind of like 2.5, 3, and then maybe a 10 and 15. And then Ted can start plugging in some numbers of, okay, this is what those would do to your budget. And then when you determine what that amount is, then we'll bring back your list. And then you would tell us, okay, we're getting 2.5 million. This is what we're going to do.
Yeah, the other thing that's standing out to me is, you know, that we're talking about borrowing some money to go do big projects and things that feel like more of those maintenance items to me, like you were calling out, Jeff, on the 53rd to Isley. We still are going to be budgeting money for street improvements and street repairs like we've been doing the last several years. And so for an item that's maybe 350 is at the top of what we would do for a big project out of our typical maintenance, but we could certainly consider that project specifically as something that we would do out of our typical street improvement budget.
So
I'm more interested in financing the really large, we're going to move the needle projects than the kind of the maintenance. Doesn't feel like we should finance that.
So the issue on the 53rd Woodlawn to Rock is that road really wasn't built. When it was rebuilt, it really wasn't rebuilt to the standard it should have been. And that was admitted to right up front. I think they only put 2 inches of asphalt on that, which is not what you normally do on a road, especially a road with the usage like that one gets. So this is really finishing a project that was started a number of years ago. Even though it looks more like it's a maintenance issue, it's really bringing that road up to the standard that it should have been in the first place. And I know the city didn't have a lot of money at the time to do anything like that. And so that's why they struggled with. And so they did something to get by, because that section of that road was in as bad a shape as it is from Woodlawn to Oliver is today. At that time, it was so bad they were thinking of closing it at the time. I do remember that discussion. Item 3, the issue there is that WAMPO does have that on the TPM. So if we move forward with the engineering, we can probably get that rebuilt. And I've had several citizens ask me about when we're going to do something about 45th. And I agree, it's not as bad a shape as 53rd, but it's in poor shape. And there is a lot of citizen interest in getting something done about it, especially with the school traffic over there with Sunrise along that stretch of road. It adds a lot to it. 4, 5, and 6, we just signed contracts to have those cracks sealed. So I'm real concerned about even considering a mill overlay, maybe a top treatment. Yeah, and I did allude to that the other day, that we should do something like that, and probably also look at striping, but I wouldn't be interested in striping. We're just doing crack repairs. That just doesn't seem to make sense to me. So anyway, so that's kind of my feel about it. I like 1, 2, and 3. That I think those would be good ones to look at, but I'm just not excited about the other ones at all. So
I kind of agree with that, and I would be open to borrowing money for the first 3 to cover all that. And I will make my comment about 45th. I never drive in the lane on 45th because that road is so rough. I'm always dodging potholes, and my back cannot stand to drive down the right side of the road because there's so many bumps. It's a bad road, but it's not falling apart.
right, it isn't. You're right.
Okay, appreciate that. That gives us some direction. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is the American Rescue Plan Act. So Bel Aire's getting 1.25 million or 1,259,000. Ted, have we got the first payment yet?
We got Thursday.
Thursday, we've got the first payment. So half of it we get now, and then we'll get the other half next year. So what we're looking at, to give the citizens and council a little update. So what's allowed? Again, we're not going to stake any meals or anything on this, but this is what we've heard, is that these are allowable and these are not allowable. Everything seems to be floating around as to whether it is or not. And so, but we feel comfortable with these. So what's allowable is respond to public health agency or negative impacts, and basically from COVID, provide premium pay essential to workers, cover city services it could not afford because of the pandemic related shortfalls, and necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband. So those are the things that ARPA 1, 2, 3, 4. You'll see that later on when we start giving you ideas, and that goes back to why we think those ideas would work and based on these allowable uses. So what's not allowed is pension fund or debt service. So we couldn't take it and put it towards land or any of our debt service. Fiscal reserves, so we can't just put it in the bank and build up our reserves. And infrastructure projects outside water, street, and broadband. So that's, I'm sorry, water, sewer, and broadband. So that's why streets, we talk about streets aren't allowed. But these are the things that we feel comfortable with. And so we put together some suggestions for you. The first thing is, so 221, we're proposing spend about $515,000. We got how much did we get, Ted? 700,000? Half of it. Yep. So we're looking at replacing the computers in the laptops in the police cars. They are slated as a capital improvement plan down the road. And by doing it now, then we can divert that capital expense later on to something else. So, and this is allowed under the first one about public safety.
When did we plan on replacing them?
3 years ago.
He just said down the road.
No, so they're end of life now, but we've been getting by with purchasing newer / older laptops from other agencies. I think that, this is a good opportunity to fund the project with.
Okay, and how does that follow under the 1, 2, 3, 4?
So it's responding to the
Public
same.
health.
Okay, what are you talking?
Yeah, so it responds to public health emergency, being able to access the internet and such from their police cars.
I think that's really pushing it.
Then the next one is purchase 2 digital message boards. And again, that's the public safety one. There's a number of reasons. We've always talked about the need for this because of community events. The other thing that's happening is we've just been talking about a lot of road improvements. We know we just heard at the last council meeting that they're going to be closing Woodlawn, and part of that is there's some expenses to rent these, like $1,200 a week to rent these. And so if we own them, we wouldn't have to pay for that project.
I was just going to ask is what do they cost to rent?
Yep.
Me too. I wanted to know that too.
So, because that's what we were, we've wanted it to, well, and then of course, if we had to have vaccinations and things, we could advertise on there. But we've got any kind of public event, we can use them for that. When we're doing stuff on 53rd Street, if we'd have to close it to through traffic or something, we could use them for that. Any of the projects, we have these, as I said, so that we don't have to get charged for renting those. And so we feel very comfortable that that would be a good purchase from this, our ARPA funds.
How long do we think something like that will last? What's the useful life on a piece of equipment like that?
So these are solar, and I don't know the estimated life. You got batteries you'd have to replace and things like that. But I don't know if it's 20 years, 10. I don't know. We'd have to look into that.
Okay, just wondering. It feels like something we would definitely get use out of, but maybe they wouldn't be deployed 100% of the time, and there'd be an amount of, hey, they're just sitting around. And so I'm just kind of wondering how long they would last.
I'm looking at $260,000 for one sign. Does a lot of road work.
No, 40,000 a sign, right?
No, he wants to buy two signs.
It's
550 something else. Okay, they're 40.
Yeah, they're 40,000
Okay,
for two.
excuse me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it's
I'm
20,000
not
a
reading
piece.
your slide right.
Yeah, the 515 is what we're going to spend this year.
Because I remember when we got the speed limit sign, we didn't have to trailer.
Yep, no, that's the picture right there is what it would look like. So each one costs 20,000.
Well, when you don't need them, you can just have them say zombies ahead and just put those on the side of the road.
So another one is utility software, a new package. Again, that's something that we've wanted for years. Ted can kind of explain the need and the benefits of something like that.
So one of our major obstacles to addressing COVID on the employee side is the ability to remote work. What happens if this hits again? How can we remote work? The biggest behemoth we have is about 20 years old right now, and if you imagine the step up from DOS system is what we pretty much use. This is if you think of your house, the furnace, replacing a furnace for our operations side. Right now, we're dealing with an older furnace that, I don't know if you remember, 2 years ago, we put on the ability for citizens to go online and see their account balance. So right now, we have an old furnace with a digital thermostat. All you can do is turn it on and off, but what this would do is allow us to zone heat, the whole upgrade of what people are putting in their homes today instead of 25, 30 years ago. This will give access to all utility customers will be able to go on and see all their history, reprint a bill, just huge upgrades. And first, the ability, it's all cloud-based, it would be. And then just the workflow. There's so many advantages to this you wouldn't believe. But before we continue going, I will let you know that all these expenses will come up before you. We'll be able to evaluate and vote on this. These are just ideas we're throwing out, so you're not necessarily putting a stamp on this. We're just wanting to get permission to pursue.
So one question I have is, what does that do for the city staff? How much does that help the city staff? And because personally, I have no problem with this, with my utility bills, and I don't have any concern from a consumer perspective that the bill needs to be upgraded or not. But does it help the staff, and how?
Huge. The processes of entering invoices, of paying bills, of different reports, it's going to affect you a lot because I can generate better reports off our system versus me taking the time to convert them to Excel files and make them look good. I think the new software will be able to just print and provide good financial reports instead of giving you what it currently does and having to manipulate. So as far as staff time, hundreds of hours of staff time, stuff we don't even know that's going on, that I know is going to save time for utility clerks. As far as processing goes, it takes a whole week to print and distribute bills right now. So potentially we could be saving new hires as our city grows with this one piece of equipment.
So my request then is if we want to move forward with this one, we have some analysis. of that.
100%. Yeah, all that will be brought out. I know what other cities have, and I'm jealous.
But if I can add to that, I think one of the things that it's important to think about is how that solution will connect with the other software packages that we have, or not connected. We'll have some of those more detailed discussions as we get into it.
I have a question. So is this purely software? This isn't, is there a hardware component to this, or is this just all software?
Purely software.
Okay.
So will you need servers to support this?
No, our existing, everything's cloud-based. That's what makes it very appealing. Right now, I couldn't, I have to VPN remote into my work computer to access anything from home. So this would allow a two-factor authentication, and you would be able to access, I would be able to access needed information at home and work from home. During COVID, we found out, one, our phone system was terrible. We couldn't work from home. We fixed that. This is the other component, the more expensive component of being able to offer that service and fight any future pandemics.
Putting it out in the cloud makes us more susceptible to hacking. And I personally don't want my information out in the cloud. I'm sure there's people doing it, but I don't want it there.
I don't think that that's true. I think that a major software cloud provider is going to be much better equipped to protect our information than the staff here at City Hall with the server sitting here at City Hall.
I think a small server sitting here is not worth the effort to hack, is what I really think. And if we have good backups, we just download a new backup and go on, and we don't pay any kind of ransom or anything. We might lose a day or two's worth of data at the most. And you just saw this week, what was it? Several hundred sites have been hacked just this last week.
Anything connected to the internet is vulnerable though, right?
Yes. But it's whether it becomes a question of whether or not the target's worth it. If our data's out on a server with 300 other cities, that's a target worth hitting. Okay. Our little server sitting here in the corner and we have a backup of it, even if it's a week old, is what's the most they could get out of Bel Aire? We're sitting here arguing over little bitty $40,000 projects. They ain't going to come after us because we don't have any money. We couldn't pay them. If we wanted to, we couldn't pay them.
And you guys can discuss that merits. Our thing is more of, this is a huge major, it has a big price tag anyway we going. Right now we're 20 years into this current program. So whenever that time is, when it's end of life or they force us to go in the cloud, that's when we'll have to spend $250,000. So that's what I was thinking when I said, if we can tie this to addressing a need, as far as what we've found out through our COVID experience, we can fund that with these dollars instead of in the future. So that was my recommendation.
I see it as managing risk versus, benefit. Like anything else that comes before us, it's weighing those costs versus what we get out of it.
So then the next proposal is replacing the water main cleanout truck. You remember discussion of that. So what Ted and I have looked at is, as part of this funds is doing things that we haven't been able to replace. or that need replaced and is difficult to find in our current budget. So again, that's a $200,000. It was set for this year. We didn't do it because Ann had a different priority.
We traded that for a different truck, right?
Yes. And then for 2022, we're proposing, spending about $750,000 on doing sewer and water improvements. So the cure in place pipelining for Aurora Park and Lawn Terrace. So again, we're currently doing some of that now. This is a much bigger project. The issue is that these older subdivisions have the clay tile and then they break. So your option is to go in and put all new pipes in or do the cure in place, which basically creates a new pipe within that. So that would be spending $625,000 to do those two subdivisions. And then replace an existing water main along Hanover from Auburn to Janesville. Again, what we run into is old water mains that we have a lot of breaks on and we're always out there. Then it's time for them to be replaced. So that'd be about $114,000. So of that 1.2 million, we would do about 750,000 of water sewer main projects. And then the rest is what we were thinking for 2021. We're already doing sewer and water projects this year. So that's why we thought, let's do those in 2022 when we get our additional funds.
I have a question. And
For this year's sewer project?
We could.
We could, again, next week I have a webinar on how to appropriately track and account for these funds. So we have a 4-year period here where to spend it. So I want to make sure everything is done right and to the T. Next year, it makes a little more sense because then we're 100%, as well as, so the Department of Treasury is making all these rules and interpretations, and they change. I wouldn't, a lot of the smaller stuff we can jump on, but some of the stuff, they might change the rule and we might find that another priority might take priority on that. So I think it's worth it to wait till next year to do some of these bigger projects.
so a couple questions, or one question I have, and then Ms. Jensen has a question, I think, as well. So on the Aurora Park area, we've done some of that cure in place already. Does this complete Aurora Park? Is that what the plan here is?
Yes.
Okay.
That'd be complete.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Yep.
And
And again, like Ted was saying on the water sewer projects, the other benefit is we're working on the 2022 budget now. So because we did budget, the 22 budget had some money for these type of improvements, we'll make some changes and actually spend this money for 2022 on projects.
okay.
I'm thinking if we're spending it on water and sewer, we can put the money that we would have spent on water and sewer into a reserve fund for the sewer and CCUA expenses.
Yeah. Sure. Good. Ms. Stenson, did you have a question?
Yes.
If you can come to the microphone, it'd help because when it's broadcasted,
No, that's fine.
let's pick
I
up.
understand. Yeah, I know. I've been at home and.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just had wondered how this project here, using that money, correlates to the revolving loans that we have through KDHE. Back in 2014, there was a loan taken out for rerouting water lines and replacing user meters. And that was in August. And then in September of 2014, there was a loan taken out for various improvements to sanitary sewer systems, manhole rehabs, replace the sewer lines, upgrade the pumping stations. I mean, it seems like this is part of that loan, but I don't know. So if somebody could explain that to me, I'd
So
appreciate that.
just to kind of help clarify, one of the restrictions of this money that definitely we cannot do is pay down debt with it. So we can't use it to pay like back
Okay.
of those loans.
So the loan money that we have wouldn't go towards that, but the CARES or the ARP money would, and we
Right.
would take the loan money and,
Well, if we've not spent all the loan money, shame on us because we shouldn't be borrowing money we're not using. But
well,
I don't,
know
I
there's,
can't answer
I
that
can,
question.
I can
I
look
would
it up
assume,
on
too,
the
that anything we
KDH.
borrowed has been spent.
Huh?
I would assume that anything we borrowed has been spent. We're just making payments on it now to get the loan paid off.
Okay. I guess I don't understand. We still have a balance, so I guess, so we've spent all that money. We have a balance.
Similar to what we were talking about for streets. Were you here for that? That we would borrow a bunch of money, go fix streets, and then pay the loan off.
Okay.
So we
Yeah, but that's a
identified
note
some
and a
sewer work
bond.
that
I mean,
needed-
you're talking about a bond. I'm talking about a revolving
it's-
loan through the state.
Oh, it's a revolving loan. So we
Yeah,
can-
it's a revolving
fold.
loan through the
Are
state.
you familiar with
And
that?
maybe Ty can answer that because he was here in 2014. I'm sure you were. weren't you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Okay.
You were there that day, right?
I don't
Two of
remember.
Okay, so what I'm referring to is this.
Yeah, so the revolving loan title is for the state. So in other words, what they do is they have, let's say, $20 million. They loan it out. And then the cities that borrow that money pay it back. And then the state loans it out again.
Mhm.
So the revolving loan is not us. I mean, the money doesn't come back to us. It's that's what they call it, is a revolving loan. So they loan money out, they get money back with interest, and they loan it out again. So the balance that I think you're talking about is we went and borrowed the money to do a number of projects, and I don't remember what they were. We can look that up. But so we borrowed the money at whatever you said is at 2 point something
Well,
percent.
yeah, the one was 2.16 and the other
Yeah.
one was 2.12.
So what we'll do is sometimes it depends on the interest rate. Like now, we can bond money out a lot cheaper on the market than going through the revolving loan fund. So back then, those rates were cheaper. So we went and borrowed, I don't remember, does it say the total
Yeah,
amount?
it does.
or-
It does. Yeah, this one, let's see. Loan agreement amount. It's so tiny, I can't see. $535,980.
So we probably,
That right there. Oops,
um,
right here.
so we went and borrowed some money, 535,000 to do something, some kind of water sewer project, I'm guessing.
And then we have an outstanding balance, or no, we've repaid 165,000 from 2014.
So
I get-
then,
Go ahead.
yeah, I'd have to look at that,
Sure.
just kind of study that. But they call it a revolving loan. So they take the money, loan it, get it back, and loan it out again. So then we would go borrow and say, we want $1 million. So we take $1 million of that 20, and then we start making payments, principal and interest payments. And it's for a certain term, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever. And so the balance is what we still owe, just like a bond. And but as the mayor said, we couldn't take this money to pay off the balance.
And we don't-
Yeah, I get
balance,
that.
yeah,
I get that. I was just wondering if we had used the money we had borrowed
yes,
for what we said we were going to, and that we're not taking this money and pushing it off somewhere and then using that to
Right.
do what we took this loan money out for.
and so I
You
think
see
that.
what I'm?
Yeah, and so I
reserve like
think
that
what
there.
you're talking about balance is how much we owe left on that loan. So that's. the
Yeah,
balance,
because, right, because it breaks it down into how much the principal, interest, service fee, interest due.
So, yeah, and we've completed, because when we borrow money from the state, they always ask us for documentation that certify it's been done.
Mhm.
Because they want to make sure we're not just sitting on
Okay.
it and spending it. Yeah.
One more quick question on the bond that you were talking about taking out for the streets. How does that affect our rating that you were talking about like a few sessions ago?
Yeah,
I mean, I didn't know if that would affect our rating or not. I know right now they've got a watch out on us right now.
well, then I'll defer this to Ted Henry, but what I understand is that we are in a position where we could not, in any reasonable way, improve our rating today. It would take because of all the infrastructure debt that is out there, because our rating is based upon all this infrastructure that's being paid back by specials as well. So there'd be no way we could ever get to a improved rating, and we're so far from degrading that we don't have risk there. But
So
I'll defer
taking
that
out
to Ted.
another loan
Would not degrade
destroy
that.
the rating
Right.
we have. Not that it's a good rating, but it's not a bad rating.
It's not a bad rating. It's just improving it from where it is a
Okay,
big
that
step.
was
That
my
it's
concern, because
it's several $100 million.
I don't deal with
Okay.
that. Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on the ARPA funds?
I guess my only comment is just that I really like the especially the water and sewer infrastructure projects, and understanding what might be left for the Cured in Place program after these proposals were completed would be interesting to me, because I could see a version where maybe that becomes a priority for these funds, and we say, yes, let's make sure all of the clay sewer pipe is gone in Bel Aire, and make that a priority for these funds, and then kind of see what's left. Because I think going ahead and knocking that out and, getting that program completed would be a real win, and make it something that we don't have to continually focus staff time on in the future. Getting to check something off the list, there would be some value there.
I guess I have a couple of questions.
Okay, yes. Go ahead.
Has our council reviewed all these items compared to what the requirements are for the ARPA?
So that's the struggle we have, is there's really no one that we can talk to that says definitely this, definitely not. So that's the struggle that Ted has. And based on everything that he's learned from these different seminars from the state to the feds, this is what he feels the most comfortable with.
So
Just to clarify a little bit about where we are on the ARPA, Congress passed that law in March of this year and designated the U.S. Treasury to make the rules for it. And the Treasury has made rules, but has been kind of vacillating back and forth on those rules. So nobody really knows where the Treasury is going to go with those rules. And that's the U.S. Treasury, not state Treasury. So it's going to be a fluid thing until they finally decide these are the rules and this is what it's going to be. But until we know that, it's going to be fluid. They have not done that.
Yeah, and obviously that's frustration for everybody.
Right.
And I can't help but just make the comment that, again, this so-called free money coming from the feds for, this is a fallout of COVID, right? Isn't that what this is for?
Right.
Yeah.
So I get the reason why we're getting the money, but the reality is this is future tax dollars they haven't collected yet that they've spent ahead of time. So I know when we get handed a check from Uncle Sam saying, hey, here's some money to go improve stuff, the city's going to go planning and go, hey, we're getting this money. We got uses for it, obviously. So I get that. I get the city side of it. But I do, like all this, everything coming from the feds, it's our tax dollars that went in there, goes to their whatever. And, they haven't collected this money from us yet. So just as long as everyone's eyes wide open on that fact that, all this money the federal government spends, they haven't collected those taxes yet. So as long as we understand that, then okay.
They are mortgaging our grandkids' future,
Yeah.
right? Yes.
That's why it's really important that we make sure we spend it really well.
Right. So I guess I'll say I
Right.
definitely support the sewer project in Aurora Park that we have identified. To me, that's like the number one item of all these things you've presented here that we could spend this money on. I think that's got to be a top priority. I think in keeping with the rules so far we're aware of that you presented, I think that's the most in keeping with those rules. And it's an urgent infrastructure piece of our city that needs to be addressed. So I'm fully supportive of that. I get this computer software thing. I understand the need for it. I do somewhat question whether that and the computers for the police as well. I have to say, just speaking frankly, it kind of fits into the category that the rules say, but there could be a strong argument that that's not quite what that money is intended to be used for. So I want to be careful about those things, but I guess that's my opinion on that stuff at the moment.
I liked one of the statements that Mr. Welch said about, we just approved some cure in place projects. And if I'm thinking of this right, we certainly could make those projects part of this ARPA thing. So I guess one of the suggestions I make is, because we don't have to make these decisions today. We have until 2024 to spend this money, and maybe longer than that. There's some indication that maybe you go to 2026, already committed to the project, but it's not completed. I would like to suggest that we go on, pursue the cure in place today, look at possibly making those ones we've already authorized, because they were just authorized. So they're new authorizations. It's not something we did before this law was passed, and put those in there and see if where that puts us. And then look at these other things after we get more firm information from the Treasury as to what is allowed or what isn't allowed. The police, mobile operations and the digital boards are low enough value that I don't see them as a big deal one way or the other. The $250,000 for software for billing is another concern. That's a different type of concern. So we need to make sure that we're on solid ground with that one. And we don't have to do it today, right? So we can make that decision well into next year or the year after if we want to. That would be fine to do that. So, but we know we're pretty solid that water and sewer is going to be something we can do. So I would say put this money towards that water and sewer as much as we can. Let's just really take advantage of that today. And then if that frees up money in our budget for other things, then great. Okay, down the road.
I guess
Mr. Mayor.
I just had one last question. There's that stipulation that we can't put the money in the bank to save it. But since we have this time of 4 years or so to spend it, how does that work? Like what does that mean? Can we have it in the bank for 4 years and then, or does it have to be specifically earmarked in our budget as ARPA? Like maybe those questions can't be answered yet because the rules are so unclear, but I am wondering
There's a
about that.
possibility here that we could end up with a single audit that has to be done of these monies. That's a little unclear because I think those single audits are issued at $1 million. So the question is, okay, being as they're making it 2 payments, one in 2021 and one in 22, does that qualify for the single audit or not? That's another thing that's out in the air about it. But I would propose that we act like it's going to have to be a single audit, or subject to a single audit, and that we need to make sure that we're on solid ground for a single audit to happen.
So when does the money hit our bank account?
Some of it hit last Thursday, I think you said.
So, last Thursday it hit. The way I'm treating this is as its own fund. So you think general water sewer, there's an American Recovery Act fund. So if the feds ever come in, I point them straight to that fund. They know every activity that's been done inside that. As far as when they say you can't keep it in reserves, this would be, if you think back, we have a 30% requirement. Say we're at 20%, and the council said, let's just throw that money to get us up to 30. That's what they're talking about, reserves. I can put that $600,000 that we received on Thursday into a savings account, and that even the interest that we accrue over the last 4 years, we're able to spend. So that's not the issue they have. They have an issue with shoring up any type of reserve balances in other funds with this money.
Okay, thanks for
They
clarifying.
want it spent is what the issue is.
Exactly.
Mr. Mayor, to your comments on water and sewer infrastructure, one of the things that I'm thinking about is if we reflect back to the very first conversation we had with CCUA and the proposed expansions and maintenance. To the extent that we're able to identify, that there may be an option to identify some of the maintenance that needs to be completed in order to improve the existing operational capability of the facility that we own half of. There may be an option to use some of these funds to cover that as an alternative to raising water and sewer rates here in Bel Air. And so I think we need to be open to that as an alternative as well.
I
That'd
think
be
that's
a
a good
pretty
Question if
important.
that was an appropriate use of, because they might consider transferring it to another entity and they're giving it to us for us to spend, not for us to give it to some other.
Yeah, I'm not clear on the rules there. I'll look to Ted to help us.
Ted's
but-
got to work on these.
That's what, that was my
It's just-
main, after
just
our
a-
last CCUA meeting, that's on my list to ask whenever and Ty touched on it. I've been through 3 or 4 webinars and everybody, the experts say, that sounds like a great use. I think that should, there's no definitive anything. So I'm waiting for a couple of these canaries to go down the hole and then I can really see what's allowable. A lot of these expenses, if you're tying me down, a lot of these are technology upgrades. The reason I point to them because the CARES funding is very restrictive. This is less restrictive. So I went through the CARES funding guidelines and all these, I know it sounds like a stretch, some of these, but all of these would be allowable under the CARES Act because what you're doing is you're allowing remote work. You're allowing, that's what you say these projects are available for. So that's what drove my motivation on these type of proposals. Again, we got 4 years. However, we do need to continue talking about this and getting stuff in the forefront.
The other thing I'm thinking is along the lines of the CCUA, if we end up with an additional debt structure of some sort that we need to do, we could certainly use, I think it'd be, and of course I would ask you to look for this, Ted, to make sure that I'm right about this, but I think it would be certainly appropriate to say, well, we're going to spend this money on infrastructure in the CCUA, and Bel Air is going to incur this amount of debt. So rather than incur this amount of debt, let's reduce that debt by X number of dollars and use or AP money to.
You could spend prior to incurring the debt
I'm sorry?
because you'd be spending it on the actual upgrades, not the debt from the upgrades.
Right,
And just
right.
reducing the
Just,
amount of
you're
debt that you borrow.
reducing the amount of debt that you're taking on because you're going to do those upgrades or whatever we end up doing. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think you could make an argument like that. I don't know, but I'll defer to Ted and the webinar she's going to and the seminar she's learning so we can find out more.
Yeah, the water and sewer infrastructure stuff is definitely at the top priority in my mind.
If we're going to spend it on this year's stuff, I think we could also spend it on the lift station upgrade, right? That's part of our sewer.
So here's the thing is that's an attempt note right now, which is a form of debt. However, that was my only, because I was thinking of all this stuff. Also, when last we talked, that lift station will be spread in the area as specials. The reason I was confused is because at the time we owned most of that land, so it felt like a city at large project.
Okay.
So the lining of the lift station is going to be spread as specials as well, or is that something that is?
The one on Webb?
Yeah, the one we just approved here last week or whenever it was.
Last week.
Yeah, we haven't,
This week.
all these are,
So that was just a
Maintenance,
type
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I know, but it was $20,000.
Yeah. So,
We
and
could
to
pay
be
for it out of
honest,
This fund,
I would be very hesitant to try to spend anything that we've done this year. There's several reasons. One is that I think they could argue that, well, that was in your budget and you budgeted to spend it and you're spending it and now you want to use our money. The other thing is that by doing some changes with this money next year, we were proposing doing some of these anyway. So if we use this funds to do it, then that frees up what we were going to do next year for other projects. And we'll get into that with the budget. But again, we've got all these projects. We've got to figure out how we can leverage this money to help that complete these and then have money available for what other projects. Is it CCUA? Is it something else? So
Okay, I was just thinking that we've got a project that sounds like it fits, and if we spend the money while we got it.
Yeah, and I understand that. It's just that we're trying to look
So
big
you're
picture
saying maybe we
as,
should wait till January before we spend any of the funds.
well, the infrastructure funds, instead of spending any of it for infrastructure, like what you're talking, what we've already approved, let's look at what we were going to spend next year and future years. Because remember, we're budgeting $200,000-300,000 to do the cure in place. So if we take, if we were budgeting 300 in sewer for the next 3 years, that's 900,000. If we spend 600,000 of this, then that frees up 600,000 in the next 3 years that we could do something else with that.
Right, and I'm more comfortable with that than spending money directly on the mobile computers. I'd rather spend the money directly on sewer and take money out of sewer and spend it on computers than to spend money on computers. Because I think we'll meet the spirit of the law better, if not the letter.
Okay, well, this is all great input. This is exactly what we needed. So we'll start working on some projects and ideas and things like that. So
Next item is to go to the budget, and I don't want to cut this off, but I also want to move on. So, but do we need to take a quick recess before we start with the budget talk? No, we're good? Okay.
Okay. Do you want me to present from up there or
Please.
here?
You have a PowerPoint?
I don't have PowerPoint. We're just going to work off the budget document.
Okay, then.
I'll
then you don't
run
need to
up
be
there.
It's up to you.
What I'm working off of is this massive document there. Before we start, it's a great day in Bel Aire, right? This is kind of the first budget we've had since 2020. We did really good work, land sales and refinance that helps the budget out a lot. Now, as you can see on page 1, it's a little bit of a summary. I'm always cautious of our operating revenues meeting operating expenditures. And 2022 budget's no different. We're projected to hit about, in the general fund, $6.7 million in operating revenues. And that doesn't include any American Recovery Act funds, and that's why it's an operating expense, not no one-time expense or revenues. On expense side, one thing to highlight is capital improvement transfer to streets is $500,000. That was never there before. Before we would fund personnel, contractuals, commodities, some maintenance activities, mainly land and debt specials, and then what was ever left and above the 30% threshold in our reserve is what we spent for one-time expenditures. So what did all these land sales do? It freed up that money to be used specifically inside our budget for street improvements. When we talk about debt financing, that $2 million, that's really where I'm going to point to with the S&P when I'm at the rating companies and they say, where are you funding this or that? As you kind of realize when we have that workshop and you say, I wish we can do the big project, but we can't afford it because we have to use one-time expenditures for this $550,000. Well, this year we have, and for future years, we have that 500 baked into our operating budget. So that's the advantage. And when I say you can do a $2 million project, because 100,000 of that is going to fund that $2 million debt service. So every year after that, we'll have that money to spend on debt service. So that's where I'm seeing and telling Ty, let's look at it, taking advantage of these low interest rates. The next thing, and I tried to make it a little more simple because we usually try. After we fund all the personnel, contractuals, commodities, debt service, where's the biggest risk in the city that I see right now is, remember, we sold a lot of land that had specials tied to it. Those specials don't go away. We stop paying them. But what happens if the developer, something happens to the economy, we're going to get them right back. So that's why I'm not saying let's find a lot of debt projects and do that. We still need to be cognizant of there's still some liability out there. We're a growing city. We're always going to have that type of liability. But right now, the housing market is structurally right. We have lots of homeowners that actually have money. That's the difference between what you're seeing today and this somewhat bubble in 2008 and 2006 is they were highly leveraged buyers. Now what we're seeing is cash offers. We're seeing a lot of crazy stuff going on. That's the difference that I see. Now there's still inflationary risk. Everybody knows from reading any article, there's always going to be risk in the future. But that's what me as the city's finance director looks at is, how firm is this housing growth we're seeing? And as of right now, I see a lot of advantages and growth for the city. Continuing on, pay at line 23, and we'll go through some of the highlights of the budget, but that's what I'm estimating right now. We're going to end 2021 with about $2.4 million in our cash balance. This year, I just kind of said, all right, let's take 30% reserves and subtract it. And that's what we have left over to spend in those one-time expenditures. Throughout this budget, I'll go through a lot of different things, but these are kind of the 4 recommendations that the city's giving. 2021, we did a lot of work in personnel. We shored up a lot of market inefficiencies, but we didn't touch every employee. Ty has a draft proposal for an employee recognition policy, and to fund that as far as either 5-year bonuses, and Ty can get more and more in depth in that. But we suggested that would be a good opportunity to use that one-time expenditure. So a lot of your guys's what we've heard in the past is we really want to run under budget. We want to have reserves. We want to do what's right. And I think that really ties with our employees doing more with less, because a lot of our savings come from turnover. So if we're losing one employee, the 3 other employees in that department need to work harder to make up for that lost employee or turnover. That's what I'm saying. So in that year, we're going to save money. They should be able to get recognized maybe with a bonus of some sort, whatever tie, which will be clearly laid out in a policy. But that line just kind of funds that policy if we want to go forward with that decision. The 2 other major capital outlay that I'm suggesting this year, as we've talked in the past, but because we're redoing Woodlawn, it'd be nice to invest some more in Bel Aire Park. It's our most used park, I think, and we've talked about it. So I put those in our budget. And then the remaining, as you know, our favorite thing to do is to address streets. So all in told, if you want to say $500,000 plus the $320,000, that's $820,000 we would be transferring to streets in 2022. So that's the summary of the budget, and we can go through individual departments here, but I just really wanted to start with the summary and see what people think.
I want to ask you about the Bel Aire Park improvements. Do we think the road will be far enough through that we can actually spend that money next year, or would it need to wait a year?
I don't see if to me, it's not going to affect the street. It might be a day or 2 for a company an outfit. I don't think it's going to. Are you worried about the construction?
I'm worried the construction might back into the fence we just put in around the basketball court or something like that,
I wouldn't.
I might add to that. I think last time we talked about investing in Bel Aire Park, one of the things that we wanted to do was get the street put in and then think through what the park design overall might look like. Does it make sense for the tennis court to still be where it's at? Does it make sense for the basketball court to still be where it's at before we made significant investments in improving that? And in my mind, I think that's why we didn't move forward with it last year. And I think, unfortunately, our street project's been delayed longer than we would like, and we're maybe in that same position this year from my perspective.
I think we're maybe not in the same position because now we have an engineering design. We know where that road is going to be, what it's going to look like. So I think you could make plans to second half of next year, do those improvements in that park. I'm not setting a date, but I'm saying sometime second half of next year, you could do those improvements and be fine. But
Yeah.
because we have a design, okay?
But what we don't have is we haven't done any design work on the park. And so
That's right.
these listed expenses are for specific improvements, not first to do some design work and then to do some improvements to the park. And
That
so
is true.
maybe what we need to think about is setting aside, $25,000 for design work on the park to have somebody do some concepts and make sure we're,
Maybe what we
set
could,
up to do something there, and then think about budgeting for the specific expenses as a result of that design.
and maybe we could just kind of change the title to Bel Air Park Improvements for
That was what I was gonna
50,000 or
suggest, for a-
75,000, and then we could then start, get a price for the design. Maybe that's 5,000, and then we'd have 20 to do something. So maybe we just title it Bel Air Park Improvements for a certain amount.
At 95,000?
Bel Air Park design and
What-
improvements. So,
Yeah,
95,000.
whatever you, whatever.
I'm okay with that. I just didn't want to rush in and
Sure.
spend money on something that might get torn up.
Sure.
We don't do that.
Yeah, I'd say maybe less than 95,000 would be good. But
Well, the only reason I threw that number out, because line 27 and 28 add up to 95,000.
Yeah.
But okay.
that doesn't mean we have to spend 95.
As far as the
Exactly.
amount goes, are you one way or the other? Do you want 50,000? What amount? A lot of, because what you're doing when you lower it, you're freeing up money. So at what level would you guys feel comfortable in our draft 2 budget to put that?
Maybe we can come back to that after
Okay.
we go through some other items. I had a high level question on just the general revenue increase. I saw on page 2, it's up 8%.
Mhm.
And that's, a pretty substantial revenue increase. And that's on just line 1 of page 2 there. It's that up 8%, which is 259,000. I'm just curious, do we have an idea of how much of that growth is from new development that we're collecting taxes on versus the increase in assessed value that's, just existing taxpayers paying more at the same mill levy?
Sure. So new improvement construction is around 2.2 million or $2 million. So that was 34% is new construction on that money.
One of the things that I've been thinking about and I'm just mildly concerned about is year over year, we're seeing quite a bit of growth in assessed value. And so while that means our mill levy stays the same, the actual amount that we as homeowners here in Bel Aire are writing a check for keeps going up and up and up. And, I know here in Bel Aire, we've had a constrained budget for a really long time, and we've got a lot of infrastructure projects that need done. We've got a lot of nice to have projects that need done. But there'll come a point where we'll have to start balancing spending all of that additional money, the additional increases in tax versus thinking about returning some of that to the taxpayers. And I don't know if this is the year to start making some small incremental steps in that direction or not. But what I don't want to do is have assessed values continue to grow and grow and grow, and every penny of that money gets spent, forever. I just don't think that that's, something that I as a taxpayer want to see happen. And so when I'm thinking about some of the things that we've got on here, I think they're all great things to come on here, but there may be an opportunity to, strike $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 through the course of some line items and drop a mill from the mill levy and just return a small part of that assessed value growth and really the progress that we've made here in Bel Aire over the last year with our land sales and our reduction in special assessments and the efficiencies that we've gained back into people's pockets. So.
And I would ask if that is the will of the council, which you guys, that's completely reasonable. Make sure you broadcast that to me. So when we're talking long-term debt, when we're talking forecast, I understand what the view is. I know we're never going to know, or we go budget year to budget year, but that is important when we talk about major road projects, what we can and can't do and what we can capitalize on.
Yeah, and it's just something that's been rattling around in my head is how do we think about that? And, personally, I'd like to see us target, I think it'd be awesome if we could even just lower the mill levy by $0.50 this year, just to send that strong message to our tax base and the rest of the community that, man, Bel Aire's financial position is getting stronger. We really have turned a significant corner here. Even a half a mil would be fantastic. A mil would be better. And I think we're certainly in a position where we can at least consider that as an alternative at this point.
Yeah, I agree, and it'll help us get past this new thing about having to have a budget process for all our citizens. Because, you know, I don't like paying more taxes every year either. And my house evaluation, I'm sure, has gone up enough that I'm going to pay considerably more taxes. So yeah, I don't have a trouble spending the money that comes from new development, you know, making that part of the budget, but I'd like to see the existing homeowners not impacted so heavily. And we've got a lot of older people that are on fixed incomes in other parts of the city. You know, the new parts are the rich people, I guess is one way to say it. But, you know, they've got the money to spend right now, whereas some of our older parts of the city, they don't have as much disposable income. And it would be nice if we could try to hold their actual tax to the same level or a little higher if we have to. And not do like we did last year where we had a 41 mil and then ended up charging 41.7 or whatever it was because the county raised it up on us.
I was just going to say, to me, the issue isn't our mill levy. The issue is what the county does. This is a county problem,
What do you
right?
mean by that?
The tax assessments that are made in the annual, I mean, used to not
Right.
be such a frequent
It's not in our
upgrade.
control.
It's
that
not,
portion.
it's out of our control. And I don't know. I'm sympathetic to the view that ideally we'd like to be paying lower taxes. What I am afraid of is lowering the mill levy at all. And then, you know, I don't want to have to one day have to raise the mill levy after we've lowered it. That's what I fear. And we've been steady as she go for a long time. The mill levy's been stable, and there's something to be said for keeping it stable because it allows planning to take place. You know, I think it makes Ted's job easier. I think maybe, although we're not here to just make Ted happy, but we want to keep Ted happy.
We're in a growing community, so if we were in a stagnant community, which believe me, it's a lot more difficult. You can plug in the 2% or the 1% every year. This year, I mean, if you look at the history of Bel Air, we have up and down years. We have, you know, a lot of different things. So my biggest question to the council would be if you wanted to just do new improvement. So take 33%, say we can only capitalize on 30% of the 259,000. So now right now we're gonna have to start cutting almost 200,000 from the current budget. I need direction on that. Where would you like that cut?
I guess I don't know. Again, I get the point about wanting to lower the mill levy, but we still have a significant amount of debt that our taxes are going to, right? I don't know. I'm just not convinced that we ought to do that, lowering the mill levy. I don't want to raise it by all means. I don't want to raise it, but I am very cautious about lowering it because I think it should at least stay the same for now. I just don't think we're in a financial position to lower it, I guess.
Well, so I think it's important, you know, the mill levy is the rate, right? It's the rate that's assessed. It's not the dollars that people pay. And so by holding the mill levy constant, we're not actually holding constant the amount that people are having to pay, if that makes sense. And so that consistency isn't really there for the residents of Bel Air. And I realize that the county assessed values are outside of our control, but the rate that people pay, the amount of money that we spend is what drives the mill levy. So we say, hey, we're going to spend $6.75 million. And then we kind of calculate that translates to the 45.3 or whatever that mill levy is. And so if we think we have an opportunity to, you know, not capitalize on the full amount of the assessed value, which I think we do, or at least we should entertain, then we're not saying that we're setting ourselves up to collect less dollars in future years. We would still likely be at least collecting those same dollars in future years, if I understand this correctly.
Right. And I guess, yeah, I understand the difference between the actual dollar amount and the mill levy itself, but if it's going to increase because the assessed value increases, I mean, our expenses are increasing as well, right? I mean, I think
Yeah, but I don't think our expenses are increasing at the same rate as property values. Because my property value may go up as much as 25% this year based on home sales. And so I don't want my taxes going up 25%.
Yeah, if we saw that happen, I think we'd be taking a different
I don't know that that
perspective
trend is
here,
going
but
to continue though. I
it's
mean, there's
about
obviously a
60.
spike that's
I
happening
know,
right
I
now. I
understand,
get that.
But
I get
if,
that.
but if Sedgwick County appraises houses appropriately, they're going to take that spike and they're going to run with it.
Yeah, and
Because
I
that's
think
what
we
they're
would need to look at that real
supposed to
careful if
do.
that happens. So we would need to look at that real careful if that happens. It has not happened this year, but there is a possibility it could happen next year. Don't know that. Don't have that crystal ball. I kind of agree with a little bit of both sentiments here. It may not be the time to lower the mill levy, but certainly never increase it. But I also understand, and I don't know how much you know about economics and Laffer curves and those kinds of things. Unfortunately, with property taxes, the elasticity of it is not great. It takes time. If you lower the taxes, it will take time before you see some benefit out of that with growth in commercial retail development. But one of the things that does hold Bel Air back to some degree is those higher rates. And when people do their pro forma analysis of an investment of a retail business or any other type of business, taxes are a part of that pro forma. And when they see that mill levy, then they say, well, I can go down the road and I can get a, what is it, about 10%
50%
reduction? I'm
About a
sorry,
50% discount
50%
levy,
discount,
yeah.
is that much?
in Wichita.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So they go down the road and see 50% discount, they say, well, all other things equal, I'm gonna go down the road. Now, not all other things equal, and we tried to work to keep all other things from being equal, okay? But that is in the analysis. So I do have, Ms. Stinson is raised her hand. She wanted to make a comment or question.
I'm confused as everybody else on this whole deal, but I know that Senate Bill 13 makes this whole game plan about the mill levy change.
Yeah.
It's all about the budget money that you're requesting. It's not about the mill levy anymore. And with the revenue neutral rate, the mill levy actually does reduce. It
Okay.
reduces down to 442.336, correct? Because that's what you got on here. Or that's what came from this.
Yeah, if you did net revenue neutral, that's true.
16, I'm sorry, page 16.
Mhm.
So you're actually going to get the same amount of money that you got last year because of this, right? You've actually, and it's actually reduced the mill levy. But I don't think the mill levy is a consideration anymore as far as it had been in conversations years past. And so right now, if you guys didn't do anything, the mill levy would be 42.336. That's what it would be. That's the money you would get. And I know that you're going to go ahead and request the hearing on that because they've suggested you do that. Is that correct?
That's fine.
Yep, I was just going to say, yeah, no, I watched the video and I know that that's what they're recommending, which is fine because you don't want to get in a position, right? Because your final evaluation isn't even coming out until November. I can see a big overhaul in this whole process because it's like herding cats. I'm telling you, it's all
But-
over the place.
With our current budget, though, we are not requesting the revenue neutral rate. Our current budget would be the mill levy neutral rate at 45.73, and that's why page 17 says we intend to exceed the revenue neutral
Right.
rate.
And what is that third digit? You've only got it down to 2.
For the county purposes, you only do the 2.
But on your,
It should be 0.
oh, okay, because on
If you
your,
look, and I know on page 2, it's really all we do is take that average, take the total assessed.
right, got
And
it.
divide it by 1,000 and do 45.73, or, that's all I do to
Okay.
it. So it's always 0 to me. on
Okay.
the amended or the
Sure,
proposed.
sure. I guess what my concern is we have so much over the 30%. It just seems like everything that comes out says we've got 48%, we have 50-something%, and it just seems like we're collecting more tax money than we need to because we've got this huge percentage over the 30 that you're supposed to budget for. I mean, that's kind of the plan, right?
So there's a couple of philosophies on that.
And I'll let you
and
speak, because that's, I still.
The council can direct the finance office or all our directors to have a different philosophy on budgeting. We consider if we're spending less than what we're allotted is a victory for that year. If we're going to be held hard to it, I guarantee you we'll be at 30 every year. That's the relationship we've had with our city manager and with the council is we're going to request some funds, but we're not going to spend up to the level every year. And again, we can spend to the level, and that's where the employee recognition policy comes in. Is hey, if you guys do a good job, spend less with more. We're going to help you out some more, and that's where really what you guys that's your direction. If you want to keep it at the revenue neutral rate, we can't make some of the. We have to remember that all throughout the whole year because we've made some major steps in 2021 to shore up a lot of areas that aren't possible if we have that philosophy. So that's something we need to really work out.
My proposal is not to keep it at the revenue neutral rate. I recognize we're a growing city and our expenses are growing as a result of being a growing city. And so we are going to spend more than we did last year. I think my concern is starting to signal to the market, to the world, the city of Bel Aire is in an improving financial position, and you shouldn't expect taxes to be this way forever. And so if you're a commercial investor, you're looking to build commercial or retail here, you see, the city of Bel Aire lowered their mill levy by $500,000 this year. Maybe they're going to lower it by $500,000 next year. And so I'm going to get 10 years of tax abatements as part of my IRBs. And so I don't really have to worry about this for 10 years. And if we're on a trajectory of $500,000 rate down every year, that trajectory maybe starts to look attractive enough that the mill levy becomes less of a barrier to those commercial folks that we have. So I guess my proposal would be to see if the council would be okay with looking at an option that reduce the mill levy by somewhere between $500,000 and a full mill, and see what that would look like and where we would make a cut.
Yeah, I was hoping we could reduce the mill this year too. And if we can't do as much improvements for things like 53rd, we may have to put some of that off. You know, we're still recovering from years of being in deep debt. So we're not out of the hole, but we shouldn't be digging it any deeper. So
Those are good arguments. I'm open to the discussion.
For your reference, a mill is the $76,000. So you just divide your total AV by 1,000 or 1,000.
So if you reduce the mill by 0.5%, you're talking about $35,000, $36,000.
Something like that. Yeah.
we're not talking a huge amount of the budget.
I think we should probably pursue that one. Just as Councilmember Smith
positive
said,
sign,
just
yeah.
as a sign of we're trying to do something to make that improvement for the citizens.
And every year, if we could target a $500,000 reduction every year for the next 10 years and have that be just a strategy that gets talked about, maybe it's not possible every time, but it may be, and that maybe puts us in a competitive position 10 years from now.
So for draft 2, our first discussion item was let's turn Bel Air Park into kind of a design. Let's massage that a little bit. Do you want me to lower, say we start at 95,000, $500,000 is around 30,000. Do you want me to make that project cost 60,000 and then lower the mill a half? You know what I'm saying? Because every time you lower the
Exactly,
mill,
I
we
know.
have to
Yep.
counter with an expense. So I don't, I need direction. If we're going to take it down, we need to know where our expense comes from.
We may have to find some other things too, because you've got us here at 45.73 mils, I believe. And our goal has always been 45. So I think we should start at 45 with the budget.
Okay. There's other things we can
And
talk
then
about
maybe,
in the future. I just,
44 and a half, so
yeah,
we
yeah.
can actually get reduction
So 44.5 is our mill levy target.
is a target. Yeah, I like 42 also, but.
All right, let's not bounce around on that number. Okay, very good. Yeah, you can speak.
Get some water.
And the only reason I'm doing this is because I followed Senate Bill 13. And what it has done is it's put the responsibility back on the taxpayer to follow what you guys do on the budget, okay? Nobody's going to police it, nobody, but taxpayers. So if anybody's watching this, you might want to pay attention because nobody's going to enforce this. Taxpayers going to have to ask for a refund if you guys don't do what you're supposed to do. And I realize they're going to massage it a little bit and make it a little easier for people to understand. This will be our test year, the way I understand it. I did have a question of Ted, and maybe you two know it also. Are you planning on amending the budget for 2021? And if you are, how is that impacting this budget, 2022?
Yeah, so, and I remember you had that concern so when are you concerned about the tax lid or what's your concern?
No, I was just wondering.
Oh, the amendment, okay. Really the only amendment I would propose is, yeah, the only amendment I would propose is an amendment to the transfer schedule, which would take some of our excess reserves we experienced in 2020 due to COVID and move it over to the capital improvement program, which for streets.
Okay.
So when you budget you have to account for every dollar in your budget.
Mhm.
So it's really a amendment to the transfer schedule. It allows a transfer.
Okay, so it will have no impact on the 2022 budget, is what I'm trying to decide.
The only thing it impacts is the cash available at the end of 2021, which,
Okay.
so yes and no.
right.
We're spending more, or we're transferring more money from the general to the capital improvement program in 2021 than we
And
anticipated.
that will show up on another.
And that
report
shows up
down.
on, yep.
Okay,
Yep.
but it won't have anything to do with the way the county reports to you,
No.
because that's.
Because all that is, if you look at the state budget form, our reserves is actually counted as an expenditure.
Right.
So that's how they,
Okay.
and they don't they calculate the mill levy based on basically need.
Mhm.
I
What you're
can't
asked,
put
what you
in,
request.
exactly. I
I mean,
can't
you
put in,
request 2 million, they're
yeah,
gonna set it for the
exactly.
mill for the 2 mil. Okay,
Exactly.
got it.
If there's no more questions on revenues, we can kind of hit the highlights. I know there's a few on page 4. Capers did do a memorandum, or they stopped taking 1% of death and disability, which helps out in 2022 on personnel side. And then I did a 5% increase in health insurance this year. We really took the council's direction to try to control that cost to heart, and we're exploring a lot of different options to control that cost. And so this is kind of a nod to your guys' discussions earlier this year, and we really need to try to control health costs. So we're going to try our best in 2022 to get that under in line. On page 5, planning and zoning, as you know, with all the petition requests, we ended up transferring. We used to have we have a full-time person. Half of her time was spent in court and half of her time was spent in planning and zoning. We moved her 100% into planning and zoning, and that might not even be enough with what I'm seeing right now. I've been helping out issuing permits here and there. So it's an all hands on deck type situation when we have 3 builders lined up and trying to, Keith and Mary are going to be very busy. So for 2022, we're going to keep that as her full-time in planning and zoning. The big thing too is our code enforcement officer is moving to PD on the PD side of things. That's where Park City is and other areas. So it just seems to make more sense to move that. into PD because we did some administrative restructuring and put that underneath there. So those are the major employee changes. I also forgot to mention, we're not proposing any increase in FTEs for 2022. We're holding the line. That might not be the same in 2023, but right now with what we did with the compensation study, I really told everybody we need to let's let everything settle down and make sure we know where we're at before we start adding more employees. Again, as you guys know, we always look for opportunities to be efficient and effective government, especially on the employee side. So that's what we're continuing to do. On page, really municipal court, page 6, not much change, just remove that part-time assistant. Parks, I'll update with what we discussed on page 7. On the capital outlay portion, we'll go to design and maybe reduce that from 95 a little lower. Police department, oh, go ahead.
I've been thinking about the reduction. Maybe on the first page, line 29, you can just, the capital improvements to 300,000, because we're still gonna be spending a whole lot more on streets than we have.
Yeah. The problem, and I might do it on line 18, I'd like to keep it, if you're going to lower an operational reserve, we need to lower an operational expense. Again, it's tomato tomato, but for me as a budget guy, I'd like to hold true on that.
You know our goal, so we'll look for your recommendations.
Find the right place to take it without too much pain.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's the same pot. It's just a different classification of the pot. Police department, 8, we might look at a little bit, but again, lots pressuring on the personnel. We added a code enforcement officer, and then all the new employees are still yet. I think we got 4 of the 6 that we had open. So I went a little heavy, not knowing what those remaining 2 are going to be, but so there'll probably be some savings in the PD side of things. But I also, again, we made I think a big step, and we don't want to overshoot what we promise or undercut. So
Ted, on line 2.
Yep.
It says chief 1 and then minus $14,900. Like the chief's salary went down by
No.
15,000. Can you explain that?
no, that's a hard. So really, I just wanted to show you all the. If you look at the bracketing, all that line goes to the salary line. So it's just showing how many employees and what classification they are.
That's 14.
The line 2 is actually overtime.
Okay.
One of
Thank you.
Ty's big
I had a
concessions
problem
are
with that first 2.
Got it.
Chief Atterbury does an amazing job, and I really appreciate the finance office's relationship with both him and Lieutenant Fox. But I kind of told him we're going to have to keep overtime well under control, especially with the moves we made. So I do payroll, and I have a strong grip on that, and I'm kind of representing it in their budget of let's not. Because when you do that to salaries, overtime becomes even worse. So I'm really trying to.
We're
hold
going to
the
be a
line.
lot closer to fuller staff.
That's the end of a budgetary. If you're budgeting full staff, you shouldn't have that much overtime. However, the police line of work, there's times you do have overtime just because of the nature.
We are full staff now. Is that true?
We have, I believe, 1 or 2 left to fill, but yeah, and then yeah.
Just a short comment on that. We staff the police a little lower than what's nationally recognized. Okay, so I do appreciate the effort that the police do here with being a slightly lower. Even our projected number of 14 is a little less than what's not nationally recognized for.
Yeah, and there were
the police force.
periods of this year where we were operating with significantly less than that.
Right.
And they did a fantastic job at covering that.
Yeah, they're doing a great job. I just wanted to throw that out there so folks would recognize that we're still.
And I did note a little different this year. If you look at line 28, I tried to do some of the trainings that they actually do, patrol tactics, early intervention training, drug ID. So if you were wondering, we we have a highly trained police force, and that seems to be the topic of everybody, every local government. And we're going to continue those practices of sending police officers to get the best training we can and hire the best. That's the major thing that we do right, I think. But then again, that's where it's at.
I got a question. So,
Sure.
and I don't know if this is a police department expense place, but we had talked previously about finishing the shower and bathrooms in the police department. Is that something that's in the budget anywhere? We've discussed it.
That's in this year's budget. I think.
Yeah, we've actually got a bid of
Yeah.
the 13,000. They're going to be starting.
Oh, okay, great.
Yep. So we had it this year.
I hadn't tracked
Good.
that, so I didn't know where we were on that. So
Yep, it should be done pretty quick.
great. That's
Glad you
excellent.
asked, because, yeah, we need to do that.
Cool. Okay.
Great.
And that's the other good thing about a little bit of being understaffed for half the year is, we can, right now I'm projecting it'll be a little higher because we have to uniform all these new police officers and whatnot. But a lot of that will come out of the personnel savings we had in the first half of the year. So hopefully we'll hold the line as well as possible. Recreation, page 9. Not a lot's changed. The big thing is the YMCA notified Brian that they're not going to use his building anymore for, I believe, a day, some type of program, which a little hit in that. But the two things that we're doing is Brian's wanting to add a day camp, which will actually make up that money from the YMCA, them not doing their program. As well as we put in 10,000, it might be less than that, for a strategic facility plan for the recreation department. We feel it's time, with a lot of questions of the future, as to see what facilities Bel Air might needs for the recreation piece, and if what we're providing is enough. Ty might be able to talk a little bit more about that, but to my knowledge, we've never done any type of strategic plan for the recreation department directly or their facilities. And I thought maybe this year would be a good year.
Did you want me to explain that a little bit? Okay.
I was going to say, I'm not
So,
very-
with COVID, the numbers went down, and we're seeing some of that back. Not all of it. We don't know if it'll ever come back. So Brian's really spending a lot of time trying to figure out what is their purpose, and maybe it's not the way it used to be with all the same amounts of youth recreation and stuff, and where's a gap that we can fill. One of the big things was that the Y did a day camp, a summer day camp for kids. Working parents, and they could take them to here in Bel Air. The Y ran it, and they would pay us like $5,000 a year to run it. Basically, use the facility. They took care of everything, and there was usually 40 or so kids that went to that. So they're not offering it anymore. They're struggling getting staff and things like that, and with their funding. So we won't have that opportunity for the Bel Air parents to take their kids to the rec center. So Brian said, what if we did that ourselves? What if that was something that we took on? Because that's a service for our citizens. And the majority of the people that use that are Bel Air parents. So he looked at what the fees typically are charged. And so if you look on page 2, he's recommending that, or estimating that the fees go up $20,000, the revenues for the rec center. And then when you look at the additional expenses, it's $19,000. So in the end, those two will balance out. So even though it appears that he's getting a $20,000 increase, we're increasing our revenues by $20,000 to cover that. Now, always our goal is to come in less than that, and our revenues come in more. But it's just a new program he's thinking about offering to that the rec can do for our citizens that was being done, and the Y is no longer doing.
I think that's a great idea. I remember when my children were young, we took advantage of the YMCA summer day camp with my children. And I obviously don't know all the ins and outs of the people who have school age children today, but you have that many that were coming. to that, you take advantage of that service, I think that's a great thing. And so, if the Y's not going to do it, why not Bel Air? I think it's good. Thank you.
And then the strategic plan piece of it is, we were talking earlier in some workshops is what's the goal of the rec center? What's it going to be doing in the future? Or do we keep the rec center? Do we need to make changes? This is one of the ones that Brian thinks that he can do to really add value. And so the idea is to hire a firm that could come in and ask our participants, what is it that you use? What would you like for us to do? And then look at our facilities and do they meet what the needs are? Do we need to be looking down the road at maybe making some type of improvements or changes to, again, address what's best for our citizens and what they want from our rec center?
Okay, if there's no questions, senior center, page 10, no change, really. Unless you guys have any recommendations, but mayor and council, page 11, really.
Ted,
Oh, sorry.
back on page 10,
Yeah.
the part-time senior director, can you refresh my memory as to what that role does for us? And is it part-time or part of a full-time person?
It's part of a full-time rec coordinator position that we have, and she's so we receive a Sedgwick County aging grant to cover that position, that half of position. So if you go on page 2, you'll see pretty much the same amount coming in. So what they do is they make Ty, and you might be better at this, but they schedule all the events for seniors to take advantage of. They also have required events. So Medicare signups, helping with enrollment, what to do with, I think they do some how not to get scammed. And I'm not doing it justice as much, but a lot of those types of programs and keeping our seniors active and involved. And really through COVID, I think she did a great job at literally just calling a lot of seniors and talking to them. So it's really supported by Sedgwick County Department of Aging, that side of things. The city's involvement is provide the building and some funds for the events.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor and council, no too big of changes. We did add a new agenda database software, as you guys noticed. And then our city attorney also has in her contract some database requirements that I fund out of this as well. The big thing too, like last year, is on line 13 of page 11, the chamber grant of $10,000. I included in the first draft. In this draft, you guys can discuss and tell me what to do on that. But other than that, pretty consistent with what we've done in the past with those two until those two just.
I remember we had a lot of discussion around the chamber grant last year, but I don't remember where exactly we landed with that. So we maybe should not as part of the budget discussion, but just refresh on that topic at some point.
Well, they turned it down last year. We were granting it to them to help fund a position, and then they didn't want the money.
So they have hired that position now. I've talked with Gary O'Neill here a week or two ago about that. And I think he intended to come to this, but I think it got changed on date. So he might not be aware that we moved the date of this meeting.
Okay.
But I do believe that, and correct me if you have better information, but I do believe they're interested in this grant to help fund that.
Yeah, that's exactly what the mayor said. I've been in contact with Gary, and the concern last year was that they didn't have anybody to do it, and we're trying to hire somebody, having trouble hiring somebody. So we kept that money and we just used that for events. And they do have a part-time person hired now, very happy with, and so has requested that.
Well, that sounds like great news that they were able to hire somebody. Do you know, is it the intent of that position to be a position that helps coordinate community activities and events? Some of what we talked about around the staff burden around community events and looking at other organizations that might be able to partner with us to help alleviate some of that burden. Is that part of the intent of the role, or is it something completely different?
I don't have that information because I
Okay.
haven't met her yet. Gary, I was talking to Gary this week and he wanted to bring her by. And then I think I was going to talk to her about kind of their vision, our vision, because that's been our vision, is for them to take over community events and things like that. So I'll
Yeah.
get some more information on that. and
Okay.
For
be
our
great.
next
I
round.
think
I'll
that's
have-
why they turned it down last year, is they didn't want to do community events. So we need to get clear on what they want money for and how much they want.
On page 12 is the non-departmental expenses. I will note, line 6, we tried kind of a pilot program in 2020 of not charging credit card fees, and a lot of these is really cool. In 2019, we averaged about 553 transactions a month. In 2020, we averaged 719 a month. And in 2021, right now, we're at 902 a month of transactions online. So that's, as you remember, it takes, we batch upload our system now. So it takes 5 minutes to upload the whole entire file, no matter how big it is. Whereas if we have someone call and make a over the phone payment or process a check, is about 3 minutes to process a check, or 2 minutes, depending on where you're at. So all that is time savings for staff and allowing us to keep current staffing levels keep staffing levels at current level.
Do you have metrics on how many of our payments are still processed manually and not through either ACH or credit card?
I can try. It'd be pretty easy. The problem, I can maybe run a report off our dated system. No. Never mind.
Question about this, Ted.
Yeah.
Are you saying from these numbers that we're, by not charging that processing fee, we've seen about almost 200 accounts
4 month
done electronically, so that reduces staff time on that?
reduces staff time, but of course it comes out of a cost, and that's where that $18,000 is. So we'll continue to monitor it. I know Wichita does it $1 transaction, no matter what the price is, which is interesting concept. But once it gets over, I think 18,000 is about the max I want to go. So once I reach that, I'll probably come to you guys and say, let's look at our numbers and see how high we want to do this, because it is a cost to the city to allow a free. However, a lot of cities say if you go on paperless bill, we'll give you 50 cents. There's a lot of different
paperless?
programs to increase our online payments. I believe this is the most straightforward and easy to administer program. So that's why I appreciate the flexibility of this.
Is there any way to negotiate that rate lower?
So no, it's with Visa and MasterCard if you want to try. The big thing is getting the right the third-party company that so it's you, third-party company, and then Visa and MasterCard, is getting that price low. And I've talked to at least 2 companies over the last year and a half, and one company gave me my reports back and said, we can't beat it. So that's a huge indication that what we're doing right now is pretty good.
Okay, so what bothers me about this is we're paying almost as much as we pay a person to sit there and process the checks.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's why I said 18 is probably about the max we want to give. However, if you want to go back to $1, 1.5%, or transfer the whole payment, we can.
I hate when companies do that myself, but looking at both sides here.
And it really opens your eyes to what companies in the private sector pay for credit card processing. That's what I learned.
By the time you factor in salary, benefits, and the overhead of managing an employee, I don't think 18,000 is anywhere near what it would cost to have a person sitting there and entering that in manually.
They wouldn't be full-time, I
Right.
don't think. But
On that, do we know what that rate is today? What we're paying?
So the average, every credit card company and type of credit card charges a different rate, but the average is about 1.5% to 2%.
Yeah, I know when I've dealt with those deals, you get one that gives you a rate. It doesn't matter who it's going to, it's one rate, but I don't know what the.
Yeah, so there's
the
companies
rates are.
that's their business model. We were previously with that company, and they were 2.5%. We found going away from that company that we saved a percent.
Okay, great.
So you pay for that.
Yeah.
Do we use that same service for other payments than water?
We do.
Okay, so court fees and whatever else
Mhm.
could be charged.
It's our
also.
sole, credit card process. We did do it, yeah.
That's why it's under non-departmental.
Yep.
So are you charging the 2.5% fee on all other services? Just
No,
water-
what we do
water-
is
Water?
anything over $1,000 will charge the 1.5%. So if a builder wants to come in and think he wants to run a credit card for a permit, we have a little sign that says, "Listen, we're gonna charge you for that cost," because
Okay.
we ran into that issue. I went to Ty signed it real quick. Got it done.
Okay. Yeah, we won't want to be taking $10,000.
No, I'm not going to take that hit.
Yeah, that's
And that's
pretty
the intent of what you guys are wanting, the random family that wants to pay online.
Do we know our delinquency or shut off rate, has that been at all affected by the reduction in credit card processing fees? Are we more likely to get payments on time and have less of that as a result of some potential added flexibility in how it's paid at the same price?
No, I haven't seen that have an ability. We have been low, but it's hard to judge with stimulus payments and the COVID era. We've done.
So it's down, but
it's down
that doesn't
over
mean it's
across the
related.
board. It's down. Yeah. So if you want to attribute to that, go ahead.
We paying dues to Amazon?
So we have a corporate account with them for purchases.
So that's like Amazon Prime. right?
It's exactly Amazon Prime, but for business, I think it's 120 instead of 99. Sidewalk policy you guys had, that's remained intact, and that's on line 28. Everything else is our increases to capital improvement reserve. And
Have we had any applications yet for the sidewalk?
I had a call on Thursday inquiring about the program, but no, I haven't. There might be. I'll have to talk with Keith. I haven't had. Usually, my staff will come to me, so they haven't. Nobody's walked right in and given one. Someone might be in the works with Keith that I'm unsure.
Do we have a one pager that's information on the program or something that is
Yes.
getting distributed?
And the application and such. Yeah, we have that. I haven't seen a application yet, but I know code enforcement has been talking about it when they've been looking at sidewalks and sharing the information with those people. So
Can you share a copy of that with us? I'd like to just see it.
sure.
Page 13, pool. I don't know if we need to go over that. I didn't spend another dollar on the pool in 2022. Page 14, communications and HR. Again, not really a lot of changes here. Pretty base budget. And page 15, land expenses. This is where a lot of activity went. I believe we'll have all the PBC lots moved on line 12. I zeroed out our special assessment payments out of the general fund. That's where we would usually pay the PBC lots. Now it'll be pretty much a transfer to the land bank because all our land will be held in the land bank. That has special assessments still remaining. The rest is debt payments. And then, of course, you can see on line 19, that's the refinance and land sales. I really wish I could put $240,000 on that decrease because that's really the budget area because it was going to escalate another 100,000, but we staved that off and flatlined it. So I really wish I could I could show people that, but you can't. But anyway, that's a finance for you. Yeah, it's a cost avoidance, exactly. Yeah. Overall, that's the general fund. If anybody has any questions, again, this is draft one, so it's a little weird having this meeting in July because I keep thinking, oh man, I gotta get the budget in next week, but we actually have another workshop in August that we're gonna still discuss. So. Again, I think we went over this with Ms. Stinson a little bit, but I did want to show you what the county provides me and what I'm going to send back to the county. I'm not sure. This is really just the reason I'm signing it, not Mayor Benage or anybody else. Is of course I'm not going to do it without your permission, but they just need to be notified if we're going to turn in a budget in August or in October. So that's all this does really is it tells the county, hey, Bel Aire is going to be late or needs to hold a budget hearing for the tax and the budget. So I might keep it the same unless you want me to lower it at 45 or if you want me to lower it, even notify them because I'm not sure we can increase it if I imagine it's just a notification, but I'll lower it to what you guys.
When do you have to turn this in?
This has to be in by July 20th.
Yeah. I'm probably going to do it on Monday.
I'd keep it the same and pray that we can find some good amounts.
I don't think it's going to hurt you. Then again, it's up to you guys.
Most people don't complain if you charge them less.
The really
I think we
only
should
document
just
that
commit.
matters is the actual budget. So keep that in mind through this whole process. If there's going to be a lot of notices and
Exactly what it's
notifications.
going to be is the problem.
If we want to go to page 18, we spent a lot of time on water and sewer. I think a lot of people know or let you guys understand, but this is the summary pages. We spend a lot of money on with CCUA and then purchasing water on the water fund. I would say if we could get CCUA to take over that side agreement with Wichita, that would probably be a huge deal for the city just because of that line item of $571,000. We have that's the take or pay amount that we will pay to. I'm not saying we're going to have a lot of savings, but if it's 400,000, that's a lot better than 571.
But we used all that water, right? This
We
year,
did, we did.
we didn't leave any on the table, right?
Nope.
So whether we pay it to the city of Wichita or CCUA, we're still going to pay.
So that's when you get back into plant capacity and how much is ours versus. So right now, we don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but if we can take more from CCUA than the 165, then that helps.
Because our rate from CCUA is less than the rate that we pay to Wichita on a
100%,
100,000 gallon
yeah.
basis.
Well, if you count debt, not really, but it is because we count debt. So our debt's a fixed cost. The variable cost on that is a lot less. So, and again, and this is so the capital outlay, the water line improvements, 250,000. We just started that. I think at the start of some of your guys' terms before we couldn't even do some maintenance. And then we started that $250,000 transfer. That's the amount that could go to zero, and we use American Recovery Act funds to, you do those programs, and so that's the line we were kind of talking about, either bolstering or taking down and using American recovery funds to do that. Again, we already talked about it, but we will reach that 50% revenues. That's one big thing, or our reserves are 50% of revenues. That's that one big thing that we got out of the PEC study is they really would like to see that type of reserves in our utility funds because we're so leveraged with the weather. That's the big deal. The big change for water and sewer this next year, and I'll kind of touch on it a little bit. Whereas before I would, I pretty much took all the public works staff that's dedicated to water and sewer, and we're just going to split salaries amongst the two instead of trying to say, hey, Dave is getting paid 100% from water and Tim is 100% from sewer. It's going to be just 10 employees, and then all the expenses split 50-50 on the salaries. What that does is it makes it even because we don't cost account time on each water and sewer. It's easier on the budgeting side and on payroll side, really, to keep those consistent. Other than that, it's been a pretty consistent year for water and sewer on budgeting. If there's any questions I can go over, I did highlight the water sewer debt. I'm not sure. CCUA really likes to go straight to bond, which I'm sure they'll do. We've talked a little bit. I did meet with them, and they're really concerned, or really wanting, or half the CCUA was really wanting to take advantage of these interest rates. So they'll go straight to bond, and that payment will be due in 2022 if they act now. If they act in sometime in 2022, that'll be 2023, and we'll be consistent on that line 37, page 21.
The 3% increase on
Mhm.
water rates that happens automatically per policy based on what you're seeing in the budget, does that still make sense? Or is there an opportunity to reduce that for a year, or does it need to be increased? Do you have a perspective on that based on where we are right now?
So we did a study in 2020 with PEC looking at all our numbers, and they recommended a 5% increase a
I
year.
remember.
We said, listen, our reserve levels are good. Once they go down, then we'll reopen that issue. With all the unknowns of CCUA, I do not recommend a deviance from that policy. However, if we can strike better deals, if we can do better things, there might be hope. However, I wouldn't broadcast that hope anytime soon.
The other thing I want to mention is, because it's a good question that people ask, is specifically on the sewer, we've got 75% reserves, which, is a good question of, well, if the reserves are that high, are we charging too much? Well, what Ted and I have been talking about, and the reason that it's being up that high, is because we're looking at potentially a $400,000 a year increase in sewer fees. So when we were talking earlier about $8 per month per customer, how can we minimize that? That's how you do it. We start burning through those reserves. And, so if we would do nothing in 4 years, we'd have zero reserves. So
The reserves would really just buy us time.
Yeah.
To budget for that new expense. I wouldn't say we're going to use that. That's not, that's a time capsule right there. So it gets us closer to 2033. There's a lot of areas we can address. We right now transfer 100,000 to equipment replacement fund. Prior to me, prior to about 2018, we never budgeted anything out of our water and sewer funds to pay for the equipment they use. So that's not right. So that would be an area we maybe reduce to cover that cost. But again,
The $300,000 that we budget for the sewer line improvements, I think that's largely been used for the cured in place pipe program, where we've been doing the clay pipes. Do we know, once that program is completed, are there other types of sewer line improvements or sewer projects that'll consume that amount of capital on an annual basis, or will we hit the end and then suddenly have $300,000?
I'll print it out for our draft 2 of this, but part of the PEC rate study, they looked at capital improvement programs and scheduled it out, I believe, 5 or 10 years. I'm not sure. I think it's 5 on that sheet, that if I'm remembering. So yes, there's many programs we can do.
We need to do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we'll have to look at, get with Ann to find out exactly, because like you said, at some point, the cured in place will be gone.
Yeah. So I'm just
But-
trying to imagine, like, what else would you do? Is it lift station type stuff? Is it manhole type stuff? I'm just wondering, a lot of our city's infrastructure is newer. And so of course you want to build up reserves for when that infrastructure ages, but how does this change when we're done with that cured in place pipe program, if at all?
Yeah, that's a good thing to look at and keep in mind when we're doing long-term capital improvements, to see what those are. So we'll look into that.
Okay.
I think that's the biggest advantage of Bel Air utility rates. I know it doesn't feel like it, but there's going to be a time where all of our stuff in Old Bel Air is done right, and all the PVC, which has a 50+ year lifespan, we might be in a really, really good position once we get Old Bel Air up to speed. Whereas you got a lot of cities really in trouble with older pipes. Stormwater fund, I did pretty much the same thing we did for 2021, is kept a very minimal 20,000 in reserves and put everything else into stormwater improvements. So hopefully that's around a little over $200,000 drainage improvements in 2022. And then solid waste is pretty much collect your trash fees and pay out. However, we do a $100,000 transfer to the street fund. That's primarily for helping garbage trucks fund a lot of the wear and tear garbage trucks have on the city streets. If there's any questions on page 23, I can go. Street fund on page 24. The estimates have been a little interesting. COVID, affected travel, and that shows up in the gas tax. So we went down a little bit, but nothing that we're gonna, or I guess we slightly up estimate for 2021, and then slightly down for 2022. What I imagine they're doing is being very conservative, because I go straight off of what the state's estimating. I will note we did add street repair materials for gravel and paving. That's line 37 and 38. Year to date, we put, and I still need to ask, but 700 tons of gravel, that sounds like a lot but that's what I counted up on our invoices. So it is showing what we're doing for gravel streets versus paving streets.
Ted, on the street lighting, line 20.
Yeah.
We previously had a question on, a couple of things on this, because $92,000 is a lot every year just for street lighting. It's a lot, especially when a lot of them are turning purple, which is obnoxious as well. The new street lights that are along 37th that are on the south side of the road, did we determine if we're being billed for those or if Wichita is paying for those? That was an outstanding question that I know that I had, that I'm not sure if we have an answer to. And then how are we thinking about street lighting expenses with Woodlawn? And I assume probably more street lights. Will there be more street lights than are going to be there? Are they going to be LED, and so that cost will go down, or is it going to go up? How do we expect that to play here? If we thought about that at all?
So the street lighting, I think our best hope is that it stays the same. The reason is that Westar is going around and replacing a lot of their lights, and those purple ones are supposed to be more efficient, and they are to cause less of a light issue with people that live around it. So that's what I understand is why they're going purple. But from the other thing I've heard from Westar is they're trying to replace all theirs with LED, I think, that are more efficient. But for us, with the growth, we keep adding new developments, and so they put new street lights in. And so I think our best hope, because of all the new development, is that it stays the same. Not sure that it will go down because of the additional street lights.
I don't know. Maybe we need to look into like some sort of timers on them. I don't know that they need to run all night long. Maybe there's run them at dusk for a couple hours, and then early morning, like when people start to go out walking and jogging. But my personal experience has been that they don't add much to the experience, and sometimes make it worse as they kind of zebra stripe the road, as long as your car has good headlights. So I don't know, anything that we can do to reduce that expense. That's just a lot of money to spend just for light. That $92,000, man, if we could put that on street repairs instead of street lighting, that would just be amazing.
Do we pay per pole or per usage? Is somebody metering the electricity of those poles?
So now that we're talking about, we did a big report last year, and I'm trying to remember it. I'll have to dust it off and let you know for sure. I don't want to.
Well, I know that in Some other places they charge per pole.
Do we have
Like
any?
if you want one at a farm or something, it's just a flat fee per month.
I think it's usage because, if I'm remembering right, it escalated quite a bit because we did some of the bigger streets. They put, bigger lights, but let me check and get
I'm
back to
just
you.
wondering how they meter it,
Yeah.
because the pole across from my house is just a pole with a line coming up out of the ground.
So do we have any ability to input what those lights look like? I mean, as far as the color output, the purple, I mean, that is kind of weird. I dabble in the flashlight hobby, and light quality is always an interesting topic. And generally speaking, the LED lights that put out the more bluer tinged light, I don't know if this holds true for commercial applications, but those are generally the bottom of the barrel, cheaper. It's a cheaper technology to have the LEDs put out that bluer tinge. It's more, I don't know all the details, but apparently it's more complicated to have a more white. There's always this argument over white light. And we notice it as humans because our brains calibrate all light to be as white as possible, our interpretation of it. But that's like if you ever go to you see street lights out as you drive around, you'll see orange and blue. And the reality is when you're next to that light for long enough, your brain calibrates your eyes so that you don't notice that difference. But it's when you constantly change those light sources, you notice, because it takes a minute for your brain to kind of adapt to that light to make it recalibrate to what is quote unquote white light. And we have noticed that we got those purple lights kind of by our corner as well. And my kids noticed it too. And they said, "Oh, why is the light purple?" And, we got the new light. And I do like the design of the housing, kind of like these lights we have on our desks here, where you don't see the light source until you're like under it, because it's kind of like this flat kind of design. And like that kind of thing is neat. It reduces what they call light pollution or whatever. But it is kind of weird seeing these purple lights, and it does seem to be somewhat less clear to see things. I mean, I don't know. It seems like the output is a lot less.
The internet says that they're not doing it intentionally. It's due to defective lights, and they turn purple over time because of a manufacturer defect in the light. So I don't think Westar or Evergy is intentionally putting in purple lights to help with light pollution or to do anything better. It's due to defective lights. Is what the internet says, and what I thought I had heard previously, and I just Googled it to confirm. And so we're paying for defective lights, and the existing lights, when they're white, they do have a lot of light pollution. I have two right behind my house, and even with the curtains closed and the lights and the blinds dimmed, it's still in the house is very, very bright. I contacted Evergy and asked Evergy if we could install a light filter, directional light filter, so that you only see it when you're under it, like is done in some other countries or in other areas, and they absolutely will not install any sort of light pollution correction on those lights. So
Is yours an older light pole? It's been there for a while?
yes, but it was a new light was added onto it, so it's an old pole with a new light.
Okay, because that's what they had at my corner. They put the new light on an old pole, and it's a purple light, and it's like a flat housing like this with the low light. So I'm surprised that they have different. I just assumed they were upgrading them supposedly upgrading them to all the same type. So
I think they're not. I think some of them, they're changing them out, the fixture, and others, they're just replacing the bulb, because I've also noticed it along
Really?
45th as well. But that is one question. If those are defective, if the purple is indicated or that they're defective, maybe we should get a hold of Evergy and say, "Hey, I need you to take care of those defective light bulbs."
Yeah, I mean, we're
definitely
paying
wanna ask.
almost $100,000 a year for street lights. We need to have ones that are not defective.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that, but,
Yeah.
but if that's the case, we should get that addressed.
The remaining two funds, page 25, bond and interest. That's pretty much just what I use to collects the specials, pays out on the bonds, and collects transfers from all our funds and pays the bonds. So nothing too much to report there. On the land bank side, there is lots to report. What we did with the 1.6, you'll see on estimated 2021, we used 1.6 million as a equity contribution to that refi, which will bring us down to about 187,000 in ending cash balance in the land bank fund. I'm projecting about 200,000, 237,500 in special payments. Now we've already got some deals in the works, so that might change. But this is everything we currently have on the books right now will be funded through the land bank. So any type of sale you from now on until later, we might experience some savings in the land bank fund. That's all I have for you guys. The one clarification, I guess the last 2 pages are our equipment replacement reserve and fund. We kind of do that throughout the year. As you guys know, every purchase we make out of these funds need to be approved by council. So I won't belabor the point too much, but the highlighted things on page 26 are some of our recommendations for recovery funds, but as you know, we can't purchase anything without your approval. So don't feel like we're going to go out and start purchasing without that.
Is the $50,000 line items for police vehicles? I know we target 1 per year. For some reason, I'm thinking that that's typically more than a $50,000 expense.
So so we have the practice of using all equipment that we currently have, and it may be a vehicle that's retiring, and using the equipment to outfit the new vehicle. So usually the cost of the vehicle itself is around 30-some thousand, and then to get the labor to put it on, that's what kind of ratchets up to 45, and then I budget 50 just because we need that extra cushion.
Thank you for that.
Yep, and really I just set 1 a year so we don't run into stuff like we did last year.
And I did ask that this thing from the League of Kansas Municipalities be distributed to everybody so that you'd have a better understanding of Senate Bill 13 and how it's affecting our budget. And I didn't know if there was a missing list there, but in my mind, this is probably the clearest statement of this that I found. Okay, and it's still a little bit confusing, but it's there. So that I thought that would be helpful.
It is ours. Okay, thank you. Good job. Bonnie said I responded to an email of hers last year, and it is our responsibility, that south side of 37th Street. And I can ask for more clarification. It looked like it was just like was there? Okay. Yeah, I'll take a look at that. Bonnie, if you find it before me, email me. I'm sure they gave a reason why. I just can't remember it.
She's our offline storage.
Yeah, I thought I was remembering that we were paying for it, but it didn't feel like we should be to me. So
Yeah. Welcome to local government.
Okay, thank you very much, Ted. A very good presentation. We appreciate the work and effort that you're putting into that, and all these other things as well. As Mr. Lasher, I know the staff has been working hard on all this, and that's great. It's much appreciated. Do we have anything else we need to discuss today? All right, I'm going to call us dismissed and adjourned, and we'll see you a week from Tuesday. Okay? Done.